A man named Deculein stood defiant, rain pouring around him, but his world was about to change in an instant. This was a critical moment, the culmination of a long and intricate narrative within a game world. He had faced countless battles, schemed against many, and now, finally, he was cornered, a sharp blade piercing his chest, held by the very woman he was meant to marry. His last words, a bitter accusation, hung in the air. "You damned bitch." With that, Deculein's life in the game came to an end. For Kim Woo-jin, the game developer, this death marked a triumph. He had successfully cleared the stage, overcoming a persistent bug that had plagued the nullification of engagement route. He let out a sigh of relief, the long hours of debugging finally paying off. The character's demise, particularly by his fiancée's hand, felt poetically just after all the trouble Deculein had caused. Woo-jin worked for REW, a console game development studio in South Korea. It was a place known for pushing boundaries in a challenging industry. His days were often spent in a haze of code and late-night fixes, constantly striving to perfect the immersive worlds they created for players. The game he was currently testing was their magnum opus, an AAA title that had absorbed all of REW's investments and profits. Its success was paramount for the studio's future. The core of this ambitious game lay in its dynamic narrative, the story and difficulty which shift dramatically based on the player's choices. It boasted an impressive roster of classes, from valiant knights and powerful mages to cunning explorers and mysterious demons, offering unparalleled freedom. Players could truly embody any role they desired, shaping their own epic journey through a world brimming with advanced AI and intricately crafted, named characters. If this game found its audience, their studio would reap immense rewards, but the stakes were incredibly high. Failure meant the downfall of everything they had built. Woo-jin often found himself reviewing the character settings, especially for figures like Deculein von Grahan-Yuldeine, the head professor, and a formidable presence. Deculein was more than just a character. He was one of the game's intermediate bosses, a named villain whose complex roots had caused Woo-jin endless headaches. The particular route he had just tested, Deculein's death, saw the villain meet his end via a fiancée's blade, a fate Woo-jin felt was earned given Deculein's manipulative nature. As he stretched, his team leader, Yu-ara, approached. She inquired about the testing progress, her presence a familiar yet complicated part of his work life. Yu-ara was not just his boss, she was also his ex-girlfriend, a fact that added a subtle layer of tension to their professional interactions. They had shared 7 years together, a time filled with happiness and mutual growth, building a life that once seemed destined to last forever. Woo-jin, by his own admission, was lazy, a stark contrast to Ara's relentless ambition and workaholic spirit. She was always pushing forward. Her drive had once inspired him, helping him strive to become a better person, but in the end, their paths diverged. They eventually broke up, the fundamental differences in their natures proving too great to overcome. He simply couldn't change enough for her. 6 months after their separation, Woo-jin heard that Ara had found someone new, a detail that still pricked at him despite his efforts to move on. Ara casually mentioned the company rumors about her new relationship, making Woo-jin sigh internally, wishing she wouldn't bring it up. He gave a non-committal response, acknowledging that things seemed to be going well for her, though hearing it directly from her still didn't sit right. Ara, ever practical, urged him to stop being petty and focus on fixing the bugs, adding that some story changes had been made to the ending. Woo-jin felt a familiar wave of exasperation. New changes meant more work, a constant cycle in game development. He wondered aloud if Deculein was truly just an intermediate boss, given how often his story shifted. Ara explained that Deculein's growing strength as the scenario progressed was part of the game's charm, and the overall difficulty truly depended on player choices. Then, she dropped the bombshell, revealing that Deculein's character model had actually been based on Woo-jin himself. He was utterly dumbfounded. Woo-jin protested, pointing out he'd only met the artist twice, but Ara simply smiled, noting the similar facial features and even the shared "damned bitch" last words. Shaking off the surprise, Woo-jin tried to refocus, asking how the game experience felt for her, steering the conversation back to work. Ara admitted the game was fun, but she disliked the immense pressure of the studio's fate resting on its success. Woo-jin reassured her, certain it would do well. Their conversation was interrupted as Ara's new boyfriend arrived to pick her up, a sharp-suited man waiting patiently by the door. Woo-jin watched them leave, a quiet moment of reflection settling over him as the office emptied and the late-night hours stretched on. He returned to his computer, deciding to test Deculein again, the recent revelation about their shared likeness weighing on his mind. Deculein, the character, was a complex blend of traits, intimidation, dignity, whiz-kid, and an average mage, all wrapped in a noble, aesthetic, and villainous package. As a child, Deculein had been hailed as a magical genius, placed on a pedestal, but he quickly became arrogant, his noble background fueling a terrible personality. Despite his talent, he was ultimately just an average mage, despised by many, a figure constantly surrounded by those who wished him ill. Wu-jin, feeling a strange connection to this character now, wondered if he could tweak Deculein's traits, perhaps adding something less conspicuous. He considered adding comprehension, hoping to imbue Deculein with a touch more empathy, something Wu-jin himself sometimes lacked. Carried away, he added, wealthy, Midas touch, sharp eyesight, and Iron Man. A flurry of positive attributes that felt good in the moment. But as soon as he finished, a wave of shame washed over him. He knew he should revert the changes before they caused unexpected problems. Before he could, a notification chimed, an email from developer Rain, the story writer. The message simply told him to look outside. Wu-jin turned to the window, his eyes widening at the sight of the sky twisting into a maelstrom of crackling energy. A bizarre, impossible storm. The world outside his window dissolved into chaotic light and darkness, pulling him into an unknown vortex, a terrifying journey into the heart of the game itself. He awoke to a maid's furious shouts, realizing with a jolt that he was no longer Kim Woo-jin, the developer. He was now Deculein, the villain, trapped in a world he had created, a man fated to die. He had woken up in a strange new world, now inhabiting the body of a character he himself had created. It had been a full week since his arrival, a week spent grappling with a reality far more unsettling than any dream. At first, he had convinced himself it was all just a vivid nightmare, a fleeting illusion that would eventually fade away. But the persistent, undeniable realism of his new life slowly forced him to accept the truth. He wondered if this bizarre transformation was some form of afterlife, a consequence of the lightning strike that had ended his previous existence. Regardless, one thing was terrifyingly clear. His new life was now defined by the identity of a villain. He had literally become Deculein von Grahan-Yuldeine, the infamous antagonist of the very game he had once spent countless hours developing. Deculein, the middle boss, the root of all problems, and an enemy to nearly every character in the sprawling narrative. This man, whose body he now occupied, had inflicted immense suffering upon countless characters within the game world. He couldn't help but question why fate had chosen him to embody such a named villain. Another pressing concern weighed heavily on him. He had no idea where in the game's intricate storyline he currently stood. This lack of context left him completely disoriented and vulnerable. All he truly knew about Deculein's capabilities was the total amount of mana he possessed. However, he had no understanding of how quickly it depleted, leaving him unprepared for any magical encounters. It was a grim realization that he couldn't adequately prepare for any challenges ahead. He remembered how, during the game's extensive development and testing, Deculein had survived only a single time out of 1,000 playtests. Deculein was, in essence, a villain designed for a singular purpose: to die and fulfill his role as the game's formidable middle boss. This was the character's preordained fate. Among the scattered papers in the room, he found a document, presumably left by someone else. It seemed to hold some immediate significance for his new life. The person responsible for tossing those papers at him while he slept was Deculein von Grahan-Yuldeine, Deculein's half-sister. She also served as the current head of the Deculein household. Their relationship was clearly strained, a fact confirmed by notes indicating Yeriel's dislike for Deculein. He also surmised that the woman Yeriel had mentioned was likely Julie, Deculein's fiancée, implying a recent conflict between them. He recalled Yeriel's curt instructions, emphasizing the documents, and warning him about losing his fancy professor job. The urgency in her tone was unmistakable. The lecture was scheduled for today. He had never given one before, but he understood the critical need to engage with this new world and gather vital information for his survival. His primary goal, now vividly displayed as a system prompt, was to become an indispensable part of the game's narrative. This was his only path to survival. An unexpected side quest materialized, offering store currency +5 upon completion of the university lecture. It was a small, but potentially crucial, reward. The mention of store currency resonated with him. He knew from his game development days that such a resource would be incredibly important for navigating this new reality. As he prepared, a new challenge emerged. He had no idea what he was supposed to lecture on. The thought alone was enough to make him pause. He then noticed an attribute within this body, comprehension. Graded as unique, It granted him the ability to understand anything by consuming mana. He remembered giving Deculein this attribute during the game's development. It was meant to imbue the character with a touch of empathy, a rare trait for such a villain. This unique grade attribute was not meant to appear until much later in the game's progression. Its presence now was an early and unexpected advantage. Even the unfamiliar clothes and the elaborate bathroom in Deculein's manor felt surprisingly natural. He suspected there were hidden effects at play, subtly influencing his perception. He found himself able to use these items without much conscious thought, as if he had always been Deculein. This seamless integration was both unsettling and strangely comforting. He recognized this feeling as the influence of Deculein's other innate attributes, intimidation and dignity, which commanded respect, and aesthetic sense, which made everything feel refined. These inherent qualities of Deculein were slowly but surely telling him that this body, this life, was undeniably his now. The transformation was becoming complete. The formality that his previous self, Kim Woo-jin, would have found rigid now felt entirely natural. He couldn't even imagine uttering anything rude or undignified. His walk towards his first lecture was not a hesitant shuffle but a confident stride. He moved with the assured gait of a noble, a superior member of the nobility. He paused for a moment, reminding himself of who he was before all this. Kim Woo-jin, a perfectly ordinary man from South Korea. He had been objectively tall and handsome, yet an ex-girlfriend had once, quite accurately, described him as a pathetic, lazy bastard. He wouldn't let this new identity erase his past self. He resolved not to lose himself entirely to Deculein's persona. He would remain vigilant, never letting his guard down, no matter how natural this new life began to feel. Arriving at the Imperial University, he encountered his assistant, who immediately addressed him as Professor. The young man had been at Deculein's service for 3 years, a fact that surprised him. He made a light-hearted joke, asking if his assistant was a wizard, then received the lecture material. It was a complete script, meticulously prepared by the assistant, a testament to Deculein's arrogance and lack of talent. He offered a rare compliment, acknowledging the good work, which sent the assistant into a state of stunned disbelief. The reaction made him wonder just how terrible Deculein truly was. They had arrived at the Imperial University, Deculein's esteemed workplace. It was the grand structure mentioned in Yeriel's letter, the Rotero Hall. 3 years ago, Ephorine's life was shattered. Her father, a brilliant researcher, took his own life after his groundbreaking thesis on spell interpretation was stolen. The perpetrator, a man known to the public as the genius spell interpreter, was none other than Deculein. Ephorine, once a noble, lost everything, her family home, territory, and status, becoming a homeless orphan overnight. Her world had crumbled, leaving her with nothing but a burning desire for justice. In the depths of her despair, Ephorine made a solemn vow she would have her revenge on that detestable man. The weight of her father's loss fueled her every step forward. She worked relentlessly, eventually earning a spot at the Empire's Royal University. There, she found Deculein teaching as a professor, his reputation soaring, his arrogance on full display. Ephorine knew the truth, though. His acclaimed spell interpretation skill was a sham, built entirely on her father's stolen achievements. That position of power and prestige rightfully belonged to her late father. She burned with a desire to expose his deceit and destroy him immediately. Yet, she understood the need for patience. To truly drag him down, she had to prepare meticulously. Her revenge had to be perfect, leaving no room for error. She sat in his lecture, observing his every move, planning her next steps with a cold, calculated focus. Deculein began his lecture, introducing himself as the esteemed head professor of the Magic Tower and a monarch. Mage, a powerful rank in the magical hierarchy. He spoke with an air of absolute authority. He explained the fundamental attributes and various types of magic, laying out complex theories with ease. Ephorine, despite her animosity, found herself strangely captivated by his delivery. It was Deculein's first time teaching this particular theory, and Ephorine was surprised by how effortlessly she grasped every concept. His words resonated with a clarity she hadn't expected. Even as he merely read from a script, she found herself understanding everything perfectly. His presence, an overpowering grace, commanded everyone's attention in the room. The usual tiresome traits of elitism felt strangely natural coming from him. She briefly wondered if he possessed the qualities of a truly good teacher, a thought she quickly dismissed as absurd. He continued, detailing where mages, knights, and others stored their mana within their bodies. The lecture moved smoothly, covering the intricate mechanics of magical energy. Then he delivered a pointed remark. Hard work is important, but if you're not talented, you need to choose and focus. His words carried a subtle edge, directed at those without inherent gifts. Ephraim scoffed internally. Deculein's own mana capacity was a mere 3,375, a paltry sum compared to the 30,000 of other renowned mages. She found it deeply ironic that he, of all people, would preach about talent. As Deculein concluded the lecture, Ephraim noticed a peculiar line at the end of his script, a question he seemed to read aloud to himself. Must I read this? It was an odd, almost vulnerable moment. She realized the original Deculein, the one she remembered, would never have uttered such a thing. With no further questions from the audience, Ephraim felt a flicker of relief, thinking the lecture was finally over. But then, a hooded student rose, her voice cutting through the silence. She spoke of a mysterious spell discovered in the dormitories the previous night, rumored to be the work of a devil. She challenged Deculein, the supposed genius spell interpreter, to identify it. Deculein, without missing a beat, calmly requested her name and affiliation, emphasizing the importance of basic etiquette. Ephraim was taken aback by his sharp retort. Deculein then explained his refusal, claiming that his comprehension skill consumed a vast amount of mana. He had already expended 4,300 mana just to understand the lecture script, leaving him with only 2,005 out of 3,375. He couldn't risk interpreting an unknown spell. The other students snickered, believing the hooded girl had merely sought attention. She, however, desperately pleaded with him to reconsider, her voice filled with urgency. The hooded student pressed on, explaining that the magic tower had dismissed the spell as a mere rumor. She insisted that Deculein, with his renowned abilities, could surely identify its type. She begged for a hint. Deculein, his mana now critically low at 360, looked at the spell. With a confident gaze, he declared it barrier magic, dismissing her need for hints. He then further clarified it was a bewitchment-type barrier spell, designed to trap them. With that, the lecture truly concluded, and a system notification appeared for Ephraim. Side quest complete, university lecture. Store currency plus 0.5. Later, in the cafeteria, Ephraim fumed, calling Deculein an annoying bastard. Her plan to expose his fraudulent skills with an unknown spell had backfired spectacularly. She felt utterly humiliated, realizing he had made her look like an idiot with no manners. She clung to the belief that he had simply gotten lucky. Just then, her friend rushed over, breathless, to tell her the shocking news. Deculein had been right. The mysterious spell was indeed a barrier, and its purpose was to enhance the freshman's research skills. Ephraim was dumbfounded. Her friend praised Deculein's brilliance, wondering how he could have known it was a bewitchment spell without any parameters. Ephraim, still reeling, could only mutter, "No way." She had inadvertently boosted his reputation. Staring at a textbook titled Understanding Elemental Magic by Deculein, Ephraim made a new resolve. She was going to expose him, and she was going to do it soon. The real storm hadn't hit yet. Deculein, a professor known for his analytical mind, had just completed a small task, earning him a bit of extra coin. He carried a heavy secret, however, tied to his past life and his unique abilities in this new world. Earlier, a mere glance at an intricate spell circle had triggered an involuntary surge within him, activating his comprehension skill. It was a dangerous power, one he barely understood himself. That brief moment had completely drained his mana, leaving him vulnerable. Even with twice his current power, he knew he couldn't have fully grasped the spell's complex principles. Still, he was relieved nothing catastrophic had occurred. As he walked, lost in thought, a familiar figure appeared before him. The encounter was unexpected, a jolt back to the present from his inner musings about magic. He immediately recognized her from the game he used to play. The striking white hair and piercing light eyes were unmistakable. She was a central figure in this world. He had seen this person countless times through the monitor of his old life, observing her story unfold from a distance. Now, she stood directly in front of him. It was Deculein von Grahan-Yuldeine, his fiancée in this world, and a named character destined to become one of the most powerful knights in the realm. Her presence here was a surprise. Deculein hadn't anticipated their paths crossing so soon, especially not in such a public place. He tried to maintain his composure, though his mind raced with implications. She looked at him, her gaze intense, and asked simply how he had been. He responded, "Fine, let's say," but the words felt hollow, even to himself. Her expression hardened as she pressed him further, questioning if he truly felt fine, especially after breaking a promise they had made just a week ago. Deculein had no recollection of any such promise. His mind, still adjusting to this new reality, drew a blank. He decided it would be safer to simply avoid the topic altogether. He attempted to excuse himself and leave, but she moved to block his path. Her eyes narrowed as she asked if he was trying to run away, just like he had before. A tense silence hung between them. It became clear that she would not simply let him pass this time. This was more than a casual encounter. It was a confrontation. Thinking quickly, Deculein feigned memory loss, blaming a fever he had recently suffered. It was a convenient excuse, hoping to buy himself time and diffuse her anger. He then calmly asked her to remind him of the promise, hoping to glean enough information to navigate this unexpected and uncomfortable situation. Julie recounted their agreement. If he were to be truly honest with himself, confessing his pretenses and arrogance to everyone, then she would stay by his side no matter what. Hearing her words, Deculein realized the depth of her trust and how utterly undeserving he was of it. He simply told her, "You may go." With a solemn nod, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the vast hall. The sound of his footsteps echoed, a stark punctuation to their broken exchange. As he departed, Julie's thoughts drifted back to the origins of their engagement. It had always been a strategic alliance, a matter of convenience rather than affection. Deculein was a talented mage, or so everyone believed, and Julie a powerful knight. Their union was meant to strengthen both their prestigious families. The Deculeins and the Freydens, two noble bloodlines, saw no reason to object. This marriage was simply good for politics and for securing their respective lineages. Julie herself had been prepared for a loveless marriage, believing it was for the greater good of her household. She had accepted that, even if her heart wasn't in it. However, the truth eventually surfaced. Both households came to realize that Deculein's heralded talents had never actually existed. It was all a grand deception. He had falsely presented himself to the world as a genius in spell analysis, earning him a professorship. But for the past 3 years, his accomplishments had mysteriously halted. Despite the embarrassing revelation, the Deculeins and Freydens had desperately tried to keep the truth quiet, fearing the scandal it would cause. Julie, however, could not forgive him for the lies. It wasn't the absence of love that shattered her, but the profound dishonesty at the core of their union. This unwavering stance was her conviction, the very principle that guided her as a knight. Integrity, above all else, was paramount. Back in the present, Julie, her voice strained, quietly agreed. "All right, I'll do as you say." Deculein was momentarily stunned, recalling his earlier agreement. Her gaze unwavering, she then posed one final, heartbreaking question. "You're not going to keep our promise until the very end, are you?" He had no answer. Deculein knew his destiny in this world was grim. According to the game's law, he was fated to die in countless horrific ways, a villain's fate awaiting him at every turn. To survive, he needed money, lots of it. He began making plans, instructing his student, Alan, to gather books and submit lists. He understood that wealth could buy him time and protection. Yet, money alone wouldn't be enough. This world was filled with countless named characters, each with their own grudges, each ready to strike him down whenever an opportunity arose. He needed a true escape, a path that diverged from his predetermined demise. He had to become strong, powerful enough to defy fate itself. Deculein, a professor in a world filled with magic and danger, knew that his survival hinged on becoming stronger. Though he boasted about controlling all 4 elements, his actual talents were just average, leaving him vulnerable to the countless threats that lay ahead. At this rate, he realized he could not properly respond to the future's dangers, nor could he survive the many deaths that were yet to come. However, there was one thing that worked in his favor, a unique aspect he possessed. He might not have been a master of all elements, but Deculein definitely had the potential to manipulate earth and fire. The combination of these, along with metal, led to his other special attribute, something called the Midas Touch. This unique ability allowed him to consume his own mana to unlock the hidden potential of any target. This meant his talent in manipulating metal was particularly powerful, enabling him to wield Ki-controlled levitating blades. Although he called them Ki-controlled levitating blades, they were essentially just simple telekinesis. Still, it was a rare and powerful skill in this world, and he believed he could compensate for his lack of raw power by manipulating the properties of metal. To truly harness this power, he first needed to master the art of manipulation itself, so he decided to put his theory to the test right away. The grand hall of his study felt charged with anticipation as he began. He picked up a book, and as he read, the complete contents and spells of basic telekinesis flooded directly into his mind. It wasn't just his brain, but his heart and inner core that seemed to absorb the knowledge. With this newfound understanding, he could now cast basic telekinesis without needing a spell. He had memorized it completely. The air around him shimmered with nascent power as he prepared for the next step. Yet, He knew these basics alone would not be enough to reach the level of strength he desired, even if he mastered higher-ranking telekinesis. He needed something more profound, something that would amplify his abilities dramatically. He wondered if he could engrave magic circles directly onto his entire body. In this world, magic circles grew stronger the larger they were, making this a potentially game-changing, albeit dangerous, idea. If he could understand his own body using the See Comprehend skill, he could engrave those powerful magic circles onto his brain, heart, and inner core. This would strengthen his telekinesis beyond anything imaginable. Of course, there was a significant risk of his body overloading or suffering severe side effects from such an extreme process. But Deculein had a unique attribute called Iron Man, which made his body capable of withstanding those very side effects. His current mana level was 800, which he believed would be enough to get a taste of this power. He initiated the process, and a frightful, agonizing pain immediately coursed through him. It felt as if every bone in his body was breaking and every muscle was tearing apart. Yet, Deculein, ever the noble, refused to waver or even let out a single groan, determined to endure it all. He ultimately failed, his mana depleting to a mere 1 out of 3,375. Despite the exhaustion and the failure, he hadn't left empty-handed. He now had a single magic circle engraved on his shoulder. He calculated that at this rate, it would take him 2 full weeks to cover his entire body with magic circles. It was a long, arduous path, but he was committed to his goal of survival. A month later, the first day of Deculein's lecture began, not in a classroom but outside the university magic tower. Students gathered, murmuring in confusion as he had simply given them signage and told them to study elements themselves. Everyone wondered where Professor Deculein was, some calling him irresponsible for his unconventional teaching method. The atmosphere was a mix of bewilderment and frustration among the young mages. Suddenly, a student with white hair, Sylvia, bumped into another, a blonde-haired young woman who was carefully collecting elemental energy. Sylvia seemed completely unfazed by the collision. The blonde student recognized Sylvia von Grahan-Yuldeine immediately. 10 years ago, the Yuldeines, fearing her family's potential, had surrounded their manor with troops and threatened them. This forced her to abandon magic. She watched in disbelief as Sylvia, seemingly oblivious, continued to gather mana. How could Sylvia not remember her after such a devastating past? Ephraim, a young mage of humble origins, found herself in a heated confrontation. Her father, now deceased, had been insulted, and she would not let such disrespect stand, no matter the consequences. She stood her ground against Sylvia, a girl from an influential family, demanding she repeat the offensive words. The tension in the forest clearing was palpable, drawing the attention of other students. Their magical clash erupted with unexpected force. Mana surged, creating a volatile explosion that sent shockwaves through the air, causing everyone nearby to cry out in alarm. The impact generated a swirling void, a dangerous anomaly that began to suck in everything around it indiscriminately. It was clear this wasn't just a simple magical accident, as metal fragments were being drawn in. A horrifying realization dawned upon Ephraim. If the void collapsed, it would explode, sending sharp metal fragments bursting outwards like lethal bullets, endangering everyone present. Just as despair began to set in, a figure appeared. Deculein, a head professor, moved with calm authority, his powerful magic freezing the volatile fragments in midair. The chaotic scene transformed into one of serene beauty. The frozen shards shimmered, held motionless by an unseen force, a testament to the professor's extraordinary skill. Deculein then calmly announced the end of the day's lecture, instructing all students who were not involved in the commotion to leave the area immediately. Soon after, Ephraim found herself in an interrogation room, a sterile and imposing space, awaiting a disciplinary meeting that would determine her future as a mage. The Magic Tower University chairwoman, Adeline Sigelian, and other esteemed professors, including Relin and Retlan, gathered. They acknowledged Deculein, setting a formal tone for the proceedings. The professors quickly formed their opinions, assuming Ephraim, a lowly one, was entirely to blame. They believed Sylvia, with her influential background, was an innocent victim. It was a familiar narrative, one where those with power always prevailed. The results of the disciplinary meeting seemed all but confirmed before it had even truly begun. When Ephraim was asked to explain her actions, she remained silent. She couldn't reveal how Sylvia had scorned her father, especially with Sylvia present, acting as if nothing was wrong. Her silence was seen as defiance. The professors, frustrated by her lack of explanation, began to question her character, suggesting she had anger management issues. Sylvia then presented her account, claiming she had merely accidentally destroyed Ephraim's work. The professors, outraged, immediately called for Ephraim's expulsion. Ephraim felt a profound chill as the harsh words rained down upon her. With no one to defend her, the outcome seemed inevitable, and she blamed Deculein for her desperate situation. However, when it was Deculein's turn to speak, he turned to Sylvia, asking her pointedly if she truly believed she had no fault in the incident, throwing the entire proceeding into disarray. The unexpected question shocked everyone. Ephraim, seizing the opportunity, stepped forward and asked Deculein if he remembered her father, a man named Luna, and the suffering he endured under him before taking his own life. Deculein stood calmly as the young woman before him. Ephraim wrestled with a burning question he had already anticipated. She had come seeking answers, a desperate need to understand the past that haunted her. Ephraim's voice was filled with a raw, urgent need to know the truth about her family, about the Luna name, and the circumstances surrounding her father's death, which she believed were caused by Deculein's past delusions. A chilling thought crossed her mind. What if, in his own self-preservation, Deculein decided to retract the past judgment? Even with that possibility, she still craved the truth, fearing the heartbreak if he didn't remember at all. Deculein, however, offered no direct answer. Instead, he calmly advised her not to squander her considerable potential on the burdens of the past, suggesting a focus on the future. His words hung in the air, a quiet moment of revelation for Ephraim. As she turned and walked away, a new understanding dawned on her, a realization she had sensed all along. She deduced that Deculein must indeed know her and her father. If he hadn't, there would have been no reason for him to offer her any form of assistance in the first place. The thought brought a wave of relief. He hadn't forgotten. And if he still remembered her, even if it was out of pity or responsibility, she found herself satisfied with that for the time being. The world was a complex tapestry of magic and ambition, where ancient rules still dictated the rise and fall of families, and the paths of powerful mages intertwined, shaping destinies unseen. 10 years earlier, on the day of the aptitude exam, Deculein von Grahan-Yuldeine, the esteemed head of his family, had been shocked. Ephraim Luna, a child from a collateral family, possessed an undeniable talent. An old mage had revealed that both Deculein and Ephraim held the rare innate talent to become archmages, beings of such power that even the emperor could not touch them, their names etched into history. But there was a catch. Tradition dictated only 3 archmages could exist at any one time. With 2 seats already accounted for, only one remained, forcing Deculein and Ephraim into an unwitting competition. Deculein soon understood the dark truth behind his family's actions against Ephraim's. They had crushed the Luna family solely to clear his path, ensuring he would become the next archmage. Years later, Deculein warned Ephraim to be wary of Deculein. Though Deculein might seem stumped now, he had once been hailed as a genius, capable of unexpected and powerful resurgence. Deculein recalled a time he had sabotaged Ephraim, setting a magical trap designed to explode upon contact with her mana, aiming to cause her great trouble. Yet, Deculein had seen through his intricate plan immediately, despite Deculein's precautions. He had forced a compromise with the chilling words, "I know everything, so go along with me." Now, Deculein sought to gather more store currency, an essential resource for his personal goals. He found himself at a grand social event, a place he usually avoided, but one that offered a clear path forward. Amidst the throng of nobles, Deculein heard a name that piqued his interest, Ganesha. She was an adventurer whose fate was intertwined with the crucial turning point in the story, the 5th strongest character in the early narrative. Deculein, a professor with the past he was forced to inhabit, was meticulously searching for Ganesha, certain she was somewhere within the opulent social gathering. He quickly spotted her distinctive red pigtails and adventurer's attire, recognizing her instantly amidst the bustling crowd. Just as he prepared to approach, a familiar figure stepped into his path. It was Ehelm, a former university peer, who greeted him with a tone that was far from friendly, calling out his name with a thinly veiled challenge. Ehelm, once a close colleague, had harbored a deep resentment ever since Deculein surpassed him for the coveted head professor position. His smile now held a clear edge of malice, betraying his true feelings. With a casual air, Ehelm began to taunt Deculein, asking pointedly about his research and implying it had made no progress in the last 3 years. He openly questioned Deculein's abilities, fueling the rumors that had already spread. Deculein listened, finding Ehelm's provocations tiresome and utterly pointless. He understood that the man's jealousy drove his words, yet there was a frustrating kernel of truth in his criticisms. The professor had to admit that Ehelm's assessment of his stagnant research wasn't entirely wrong. This unfortunate fact made the taunts all the more irritating and difficult to simply dismiss. As Ihelm continued to prattle on, Deculein's attention suddenly snapped back to his original goal. He looked up, a jolt of alarm running through him as he scanned the crowd. Ganesha was gone. She had vanished from the spot where he had just seen her, disappearing into the bustling social gathering as if she were a ghost. Deculein felt a surge of intense frustration, realizing he had lost his target because he allowed himself to be delayed by Ihelm's irritating and ultimately unproductive conversation. His gaze hardened as he turned back to Ihelm, his composure beginning to crack under the sudden pressure of his ruined plans and the missed opportunity. Deculein, usually reserved and composed, unleashed a scathing remark, calling Ihelm a rotten cheese-like bastard. The sheer harshness of his words left Ihelm utterly stunned and speechless. He understood that he needed to find Ganesha immediately, before she could encounter her. A mysterious figure who could further complicate his already precarious situation and endanger his objectives. His carefully laid plan was now in shambles, completely ruined by this unexpected and frustrating distraction. There was nothing left to do but abandon the social gathering altogether. Deculein began to walk purposefully away from the event, the murmurs of the curious attendees slowly fading behind him as he left the grand hall without another word. He let out a weary sigh, reflecting on how much he disliked these social events. They were always filled with bothersome people who clung to him like persistent leeches. To his surprise, he found Ganesha waiting for him on a quiet, secluded balcony, almost as if she had anticipated his departure and was expecting him. She looked at him with a knowing gaze, her expression unreadable, and directly asked if he had been searching for her among the many guests. Deculein, still trying to maintain his detached facade, simply claimed that he had merely gotten lost amidst the confusing and unfamiliar layout of the grand estate. Ganesha, however, was not fooled by his pretense. She knew he had sought her out for a specific reason and expected him to voice whatever was truly on his mind. He offered an apology for a past mission, explaining that he had returned the advance and paid the cancellation fee. He hoped she would simply let the matter go and move on. It became clear through their brief, strained exchange that their prior relationship was strictly professional, built solely on a series of commissions and transactional agreements. Deculein elaborated on his apology, specifically mentioning his inability to provide her with a talented child for a magic-related task. He clarified that he had deliberately chosen not to bring one. Ganesha seemed to understand that he was referring to the original Deculein's manipulative attempts to use a child to mask his own deficiencies. She then asked him a piercing and profound question. She looked him directly in the eyes, her gaze unwavering, and asked, "Until when will you keep living like that?" The question hung heavy in the air between them, demanding an answer. Deculein reflected on the original Deculein's destructive past, acknowledging how he had accepted empty flattery, shattered trust, and caused immense pain to many in his relentless pursuit of fame. However, Deculein declared that he was determined to forge a different path. He would live his life in a fundamentally new way, breaking free from the old destructive patterns. Ganesha was genuinely surprised by his sudden resolve. She admitted that, given her past actions, she had half expected him to try and kill her for running away from a secret mission. Deculein dismissed her fears as excessive concern, then announced his immediate departure from the gathering. He assured her there was no further reason for him to stay there. She questioned him again, asking if everything would truly be okay, and if there would be no assassinations or deaths in the aftermath. Deculein found her concern utterly classless. As he considered using his influence to pressure Ganesha, a system message flashed confirming that a death variable had been successfully avoided. He earned store currency for his decision. Deculein realized with a jolt that his entire conversation with Ganesha had been a perilous trap. Even as he walked away, the lingering whispers about his future would only grow louder and the dangers would multiply. Deculein had spent a week since the flower of the new year, social event focused on his daily memorization and basic telekinesis training. He soon realized his stamina was lacking, prompting him to begin a rigorous workout routine. The reason behind this sudden dedication was a near-fatal magical incident. He had pushed his magical limits, experiencing intense strain and near collapse. A normal mage would have certainly died, but Deculein survived, attributing it to his unique Iron Man attribute. This resilience allowed him to withstand the incredible pressure. After his encounter with Ganesha, Deculein felt a renewed desire for greater strength. He decided to engrave fire control into his body alongside his existing telekinesis. This risky upgrade aimed to implant the core of magic directly into his telekinesis, drastically reducing learning time. This method, however, was incredibly dangerous and put immense strain on his body. Realizing the physical toll it would take, Deculein understood he needed to prepare himself. This realization led him to establish his new, demanding morning workout routine. Finished with his workout, Deculein wiped the sweat from his brow, feeling the ache in his muscles. It was already time to head to work. Upon arriving at his office, a surprising statement awaited him from the Magic Tower's Qualification of Professor Committee. The letter informed him of an audit hearing scheduled in 6 months. This hearing would scrutinize the advancement in his current research, and he was instructed to prepare all relevant documents. The news immediately set off alarm bells for Deculein. Deculein realized that if an audit was being held, the original Deculein's research must have been at a standstill long before he possessed the body. This was an incredibly unfavorable situation, as his professor title was a precondition for his quest. Losing the professor title would be akin to losing all hope of ever returning to his original world. He couldn't afford to fail this audit. With this heavy weight on his shoulders, Deculein knew he had to find something, anything, within Deculein's old laboratory. He entered the laboratory, immediately struck by its disarray. It looked as though no one had set foot in there for a very long time. Deculein mused that the original owner would never have left it in such a state, suggesting foul play. His eyes fell upon an unnatural heap of trash, sensing it was deliberately hiding something. He didn't know who was to blame for the sabotage, but it was a perfect way to hinder Deculein. Thankfully, his newly honed telekinetic manipulation allowed him to clear the debris. Underneath, he discovered encrypted research results, clearly designed to prevent theft. Deculein activated his unique abilities, comprehension, wealthy magnate, and sharp eyesight, to decipher the hidden information. The golden light of his insight was blindingly bright. What he uncovered was simply incredible, a brilliant piece of research. However, it was also incomplete, with torn sections and illogical parts. Despite its flaws, the sheer potential of the work was enough to trigger a strong reaction from his wealthy magnate attribute. He saw the name Ephraim Luna on the fragmented paper. It seemed Ephraim's father, who had worked as Deculein's researcher, had made a desperate attempt to hide this work. This act was connected to the Luna family's deep-seated grudge against Deculein. It was clear that Ephraim had endured a brutal life because of Deculein's actions. Feeling a sense of responsibility, he decided he would complete the incomplete research using his comprehension ability. He promised to add her name as a co-author on the paper. Meanwhile, in the university cafe, Ephraim's friends were pressuring her to ask Deculein for help, arguing he was fair. Ephraim grew increasingly agitated, vehemently refusing to get involved with him. Just as she insisted it would only backfire, Deculein suddenly appeared behind her, telling her to move. Ephraim, a commoner student, found herself in a challenging position. She needed to form a club, but for that, she required the signature of Professor Deculein, a notoriously cold and aristocratic figure known for his disdain towards commoners. She cautiously approached him, expecting a swift and humiliating rejection. She was particularly worried because he seemed to disapprove of clubs that involved peasants, which her proposed club certainly would. Deculein, however, simply looked at her. Ephraim, bowing slightly, explained her request, needing his signature for the club. She braced herself for his usual indifference. A part of her understood Deculein's perspective. She didn't want to get involved with him either. But she knew that other professors wouldn't cooperate, and she was tired of being constantly bothered about the matter. To her utter surprise, he told her to send the details to his office later. His response was so unexpected, she could only stare, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Then, with a simple gesture, he handed her the signed document. Ephraim took it, still reeling from the shock of his compliance. She watched him walk away, still unable to believe what had just happened. The Deculein, known for his sternness and disdain, had actually agreed to her request. His unexpected approval left her completely bewildered. She had not anticipated this at all, especially considering his past actions concerning her father. Later, in class, Ephraim was still thinking about it. She wondered if his sudden kindness was an act of guilt, or perhaps even sympathy, given his role in her father's demise. The other noble students in the lecture hall whispered and stared at her, their disdain palpable. Ephraim tried to ignore them, reminding herself to focus. Her friend Julie tried to reassure her, telling her not to concern herself with those rude students. Ephraim nodded, resolving to concentrate on Deculein's lecture. Deculein began his lesson, explaining that every stroke in a magic circle held reasoning. He was teaching the understanding of pure elements, the very building blocks of all magic. He demonstrated how an ignition spell could change color simply by adding 2 strokes to its circle. These strokes, he explained, dictated the flame's color. This practical and insightful approach came as a shock to all the debutantes in the lecture hall. They were used to dry, theoretical lessons. Even Sylvia, a genius who often found learning tedious, watched with renewed interest. Deculein then showed how a magic circle for summoning water worked. He then demonstrated how combining the water magic circle with a fire magic circle produced something truly astonishing: flowing fire. The fire moved like water, a concept that seemed impossible. The students were captivated, realizing his lectures were far more theoretical and profound than they had imagined. Deculein went on to explain the paradox of magic. While many geniuses relied on intuition, they couldn't explain it, and focusing solely on theory was inefficient for true mastery. He made learning magic seem intuitive and accessible, even for those who struggled with its complexities. His method felt like a fresh breeze. Ephraim realized that his lectures were nothing like the rumors she had heard. She had never focused so intently on the lesson before, feeling a genuine spark of understanding. Returning to her Magic Tower dorm room, her excitement quickly turned to dismay. Her room had been vandalized, covered in hateful messages from arrogant nobles. Amidst the mess, she found a peculiar document, a sponsorship certificate. She initially dismissed it as another cruel prank. She took the certificate to the Magical Administration office, intending to report it as fake. To her astonishment, the official confirmed that the seal was genuine, meaning she had received a sponsorship of 100,000 eln. The reality of the sponsorship hit her like a wave. She started pinching herself, hoping to wake up from what surely had to be a dream. The pain was real, yet she still felt like she was floating in disbelief. Deculein, who had caused a significant stir the previous year, was now headed to the Schatzen jewel auction. His family, Deculein and Hadakane, wondered what kind of trouble he would stir up this time, recalling his past extravagances. He walked with a determined stride, confident he would finally acquire something he had long sought. He reflected on his early days using telekinesis, realizing his inherent lack of talent required a metallic aid. While he currently used a temporary wood-steel item, the true solution, something far superior, was to be found at this very auction. Upon entering the exclusive VVIP waiting room, he was unexpectedly confronted by Julie. He offered a polite greeting, surprised to encounter her there. Julie, however, wasted no time, sternly bringing up his recent decision to send 2 young mages to the disciplinary committee. Deculein, unfazed, dismissed it as old news, asking if she truly intended to blame him for those events as well. Julie explained that these mages were newly appointed debutantes, accusing him of cruelly crushing their nascent dreams. She warned him that his past transgressions would eventually catch up to him, urging him not to repeat his mistakes. Deculein silently acknowledged this as the last advice, her final words signaling the end of their contentious relationship. He found this acceptable, as he also wished to sever ties, unwilling to marry for such a fleeting reason, especially since he hadn't even done so in his original life. He harbored concerns about the numerous death variables surrounding Julie. This included the potential for his own demise on their wedding day if things went wrong. Still, her presence at an auction surprised him, as it seemed out of character. He directly asked if she had come all this way just to berate him. Julie, visibly flustered, vehemently denied his accusation, insisting she was genuinely there to find something important for herself. Deculein, observing her uncharacteristic reaction, found it surprisingly endearing. This was a side of her he hadn't seen before. He then questioned this unusual feeling within himself, wondering if he was somehow succumbing to Deculein's emotions, despite his diligent efforts to maintain his own personality. He quickly dismissed the thought, rationalizing that his heart certainly didn't race for Julie. At that moment, an announcement echoed through the hall. The auction was about to begin. The first item, an elegant vase from the east, was presented. Deculein immediately noticed a luminous glow emanating from it, a sign he recognized from Ephraim's research as the mark of a wealthy magnate item. As the bidding commenced, the light intensified, confirming its immense value. The price rapidly climbed, quickly surpassing 1,000,000 eln, yet its radiant glow never diminished. This proved its true worth far exceeded the monetary offers. Deculein, with a substantial balance in his bank, considered investing further. The auction continued, and a mysterious Guest 777 repeatedly secured various other valuable items. These items included a ring, scissors, and a necklace, all for millions of elni. The crowd began to buzz, realizing that Guest 777 was none other than Professor Deculein. Julie, observing his extravagant purchases, privately scoffed. She deemed him pathetic and overly eager for attention, even in such a setting. She found his actions a stark contrast to her own values, seeing him as someone who wasted wealth and lacked appreciation for humility. She resolved to ignore his antics, shifting her focus entirely to the item she truly desired: Winter's fire. The auctioneer then dramatically unveiled the final, most anticipated item. It was revealed to be the legendary Snowflare Stone, one of the 10 rarest metals in existence. This paradoxical ore, capable of holding both intense heat and cold, was primarily used for forging exceptionally powerful swords. It was considered the ultimate ingredient, surpassed only by mythical materials like dragon bones. For Deculein, the Snowflare Stone represented the absolute best material he could hope to acquire. He firmly decided he would secure it, no matter the cost, bidding for the Snowflare Stone sword, quickly reaching 25 million elni. Deculein, under the bidder number 1089, confidently placed a bid of 30 million, certain the item was his. However, a new bid suddenly came in, 31 million eln from guest 777. Julie, hearing that number again, realized with a jolt that Deculein was actively bidding against her. A surge of frustration propelled her to immediately counter with 32 million eln, raising the stakes dramatically for the coveted stone. Deculein, a man known for his cold demeanor and sharp intellect, found himself at the peak of another successful auction, having just secured the highly coveted Snowflare Stone. He had won it for an astonishing 42 million eln, a sum that echoed through the grand hall as the final call was made. The room erupted in applause, but among the claps, one particular guest, number 777, watched him with a complex mix of surprise and unspoken desire. This was Julie, a woman who had clearly wanted the stone for herself. Her mind, however, soon drifted to a painful memory from her past. She recalled a time when she too was the central figure in a grand display, her engagement, orchestrated by a man named Freyden. He had tried to impress her with an overwhelming show of wealth, boasting of his power and influence, believing this would surely entice her into marriage. He had offered her everything, proclaiming his greatness and his ability to do anything for her. But for Julie, it was nothing more than a humiliating spectacle, a transparent attempt to buy her affection. She felt like an object on display, insulted by his crude display. Unable to bear it, she had walked out, effectively ruining her own engagement. The aftermath was filled with whispers and rumors that continued to haunt her. She heard that a dignified lady, who was once above such things, had apparently fallen for Deculein and even begged him for a prestigious position. Julie was convinced that Freyden, in his bitterness, was the one spreading these malicious lies, intent on sullying her name and image. He must have thought such tactics would drive her back to him, but she saw him only as a fool, repeating the same mistakes from the previous year. Back in the present, Julie confronted Deculein. She asked if he had also desired the Snowflare Stone, her voice laced with accusation. She questioned if he intended to insult her once again, her frustration evident in her tone. To her astonishment, Deculein simply apologized. This was not the Deculein she knew. The man she remembered would never apologize for winning. His unexpected response left her utterly confused, wondering what exactly he was apologizing for. Before she could process this, her older sister, Josephine, appeared, instructing her to get in the car. Josephine, the eldest daughter of the Freyden household and Julie's sister, stood firm, urging her to leave. As Deculein left the auction, he considered the implications of his purchase. He knew Julie had wanted the stone, but more importantly, he noted that a death variable he had anticipated did not appear. He couldn't help but wonder about the original Deculein from the game, the man Julie was supposed to murder. How much of a scoundrel had he truly been to provoke such a fate? Returning to his grand estate, the maids respectfully greeted him, but his attention was immediately drawn to a terse announcement. His sister, Yariel, had returned home. Her presence filled the air with a palpable tension. Yariel was already inside, waiting, her fury barely contained. She confronted him, accusing him of misusing the funds that were specifically allocated for their mines. She questioned if he had taken that money just to buy something for himself, her voice sharp with disbelief. He had promised to bring in profits, but his actions felt like a betrayal. He had not paid enough attention to her needs. She lashed out, feeling like he was treating her like garbage, disregarding her efforts and sacrifices as she cleaned up his messes. Her anger surged, a red aura flaring around her. This gamble with the estate's money was unforgivable. The system recognized the villain's fate being activated, indicating a critical moment for Deculein, but a golden light through her red aura also signaled the activation of wealthy magnate, hinting at a profitable outcome if he navigated this correctly. Yariel tearfully reminded him of how she had given up her university dreams and any chance at a normal life, all to help manage their family's crumbling finances after their parents passed. She had endured his previous reckless spending, but this latest act, a 150 million won expenditure, pushed her to her breaking point. Deculein listened, then calmly stated that she didn't need to make those sacrifices. To her utter shock, he offered her the position of household head. Yariel was dumbfounded, utterly convinced he had lost his mind. She threatened him, vowing to kill him if he dared to go back on his word. Despite her disbelief and anger, Deculein remained composed. He saw this as a pivotal moment, a storm that had passed. The villain's fate-death variable was overcome, and he even gained store currency for it. He was slowly changing his destiny, one choice at a time. Yariel, still reeling, could only stare at him, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. He really was changing, just as he had promised. But the quiet moment was shattered by another arrival. Ganesha, an unwanted guest, appeared, observing the scene with a knowing look. She dropped a bombshell that shook Deculein to his core. Deculein von Grahan-Yuldeine, his sister, did not possess a single drop of Deculein blood. This crucial detail, he realized, was never part of the game he had played. Professor Deculein was having a private conversation with an informant who delivered a shocking piece of news about his half-sister, Yariel. He learned that Yariel, despite being considered family, did not share a single drop of blood with the Deculeins, a fact he had never known. Deculein had already been aware that Yariel was not his biological sister, having commissioned an investigation into their blood relations himself. However, the complete lack of any familial connection to the Deculein name was a revelation that caught him off guard. Despite the surprising truth, Deculein quickly processed the information, reaffirming that Yariel would always be his sister, regardless of blood. He then asked the informant to keep this significant secret, ensuring it would not become public knowledge. Before departing, the informant offered a grave warning. The notorious 6 snakeheads, infamous criminal organizations with high bounties, had begun to move. These dangerous groups were reportedly targeting the valuable items Deculein had recently purchased from an auction. The informant advised Deculein to remain vigilant and guard his residence carefully the moment the items arrived. They also casually noted his neglected magical defenses, explaining how easily they had managed to enter his private study. With the new information and warning delivered, the informant departed, leaving Deculein to ponder the weight of the revelations alone. He concluded that his treatment of Yariel would not change. She was his sister, and he would hide this truth to protect her. Meanwhile, far from the university, a group of adventurers gathered around a crackling campfire, their conversation turning to Professor Deculein. They spoke of how he had changed dramatically, almost as if a different person wore his skin. Rayleigh, a relative of Julie and a member of the Red Garnet adventure team, noted that he was even saying sweet things, now, a stark contrast to his old cruel self. The group mused that Deculein seemed to have developed a human side. The adventurers collectively decided they would no longer need to keep watch on Deculein, as his changed demeanor made him less of a concern. Rayleigh, however, almost asked him if he was still looking for a magic slave, but ultimately held her tongue. With their discussion complete, the group prepared to head back, casting a shimmering spell that enveloped them in a soft blue glow before they departed. The next day, at the University Magic Tower, Deculein found himself deeply engrossed in the system store, a unique in-game resource. He learned it allowed him to use store currency to strengthen both his player character and other named individuals. He discovered that he would only have 6 opportunities to use the store by the end of the second half of the game. Each time his level increased, the cost of improvements would double, making every decision a critical investment. Deculein understood he could not rush or waste these valuable chances. He meticulously trained his memorization, physical abilities, and key-controlled levitating blades, yet still felt a significant lack in pure combat strength against infamous villains. He determined that the improvements in mana quality offered by the store were what he needed most to bridge this gap. His immediate goal was to gather the 4 store currency required to purchase this vital upgrade. Just as he was contemplating his next move, a knock came at his door. It was his assistant Alan, who entered holding a newspaper with a prominent headline. The article warned of a wizard killer named Lockhart, described as the greatest danger to mage players in the first quarter of the game, who had now begun to appear. Deculein, however, saw this notorious figure not as a threat, but as a potential opportunity to earn the much-needed store currency. He hoped to encounter Lockhart and turn the situation to his advantage. He dismissed Alan, telling him to head back as he planned to visit the library, subtly hoping to cross paths with the wizard killer. As Alan turned to leave, Deculein unexpectedly called out, asking if he had any interest in becoming an assistant professor. Alan was completely caught off guard. Alan, remembering Deculein's past criticisms about his lack of talent, was stunned by the sudden offer. He could barely comprehend the unexpected turn of events. Deculein explained that he had observed Alan's earnestness and hard work, though he also admitted the timing was influenced by a notice requiring him to pick an assistant. He then presented Alan with a bangle engraved with the prestigious Deculein emblem, instructing him to continue working hard. Alan was overwhelmed with gratitude, accepting the honor with a heartfelt thank you. Deculein inwardly mused that Alan's excellent ability to organize documents and handle miscellaneous errands made him too useful to let go, solidifying his decision for the promotion. He also gave Alan some money for dinner, telling him to turn in early, a gesture of kindness that further surprised his assistant, who had only ever known Deculein's stern side. Alan, clutching the money and the bangle, walked away, still processing the day's incredible events and his new elevated position. Deculein, meanwhile, proceeded to the staff-only library, his mind already set on his next important task. His purpose was to rectify the errors in Luna's paper on pure elements and to search for useful grimoires. But as he stepped into the quiet space, he was surprised to find debutante Sylvia already there, looking utterly startled to be caught in the restricted section. Sylvia, a promising student and successor of Elade, found herself in the exclusive executive reading room, a place usually reserved only for executives. She was on a quest for specific study materials, an ancient novel written in Ethanol, the language of fairies. A kind professor had granted her special permission, acknowledging her status and her earnest need for the rare texts. He understood her passion for languages and literature, which was a deeply personal hobby for her. She had come all this way, past the usual restrictions, to find a particular material that met her criteria. The language of Ethanol itself had become increasingly rare since the disappearance of the fairies, making any novel written in it a priceless find. She finally located a novel, its cover adorned with ancient symbols, a true relic. Its mere existence was a testament to the lost culture of the fairies, and its value had only surged with time. However, her moment of triumph was interrupted when Deculein suddenly appeared. His presence in the executive room was a shock, and his first words were a sharp inquiry into why she was there. Sylvia was taken aback, her heart pounding as she faced the stern professor. She knew his reputation for strict adherence to rules, and she could feel his disapproval radiating towards her. Deculein continued, accusing the professor who granted her access and the librarian who condoned it of ignoring school regulations. He suggested they too deserved disciplinary action for their leniency. Sylvia quickly tried to explain, asserting that she had already received proper permission. Yet, her mind raced, baffled by his sudden appearance and his ability to even identify the Ethanol novel. She was utterly surprised when Deculein, without hesitation, read the Ethanol title aloud. He then dismissed her, stating he would let it slide this time, but warned her not to return without proper permission. The encounter left Sylvia seething with humiliation. She had simply wanted to understand the fairies through their literature, but Deculein's cold demeanor had made her feel like a rule breaker. A deeper question nagged at her. How could Deculein, a professor known for his rigid, practical approach, read Ethanol? It was a notoriously inconsistent language, making it incredibly difficult to master. Meanwhile, elsewhere on campus, students were undertaking their first practical training session at the Mountain of Darkness. Despite the inherent dangers, they all seemed remarkably composed. The Mountain of Darkness was no ordinary training ground. It held significant importance for the Magic Tower, serving as both a site for real-world experience and a rich source of magical materials. Its treacherous environment, teeming with beasts and venomous creatures, necessitated strict security measures. Protective barriers and a vigilant on-duty professor were always in place to ensure safety. Yet, the on-duty professor for the week had not yet been decided. The other professors were discussing who would be most appropriate for such a crucial role when an unexpected offer came. Deculein, without a moment's hesitation, volunteered for the dangerous assignment. The other professors were stunned by his decision, as it was not typical for the head professor to take on such a task. He clarified that his decision wasn't driven by any noble sentiment. Instead, he felt an inexplicable pull towards the mountain, a sensation that had coincided with the appearance of a new side quest in his system. The quest, titled The Darkness of the Magic Tower, promised rewards for its completion. He realized this mysterious pull was the reason for the quest, drawing him into the mountain's depths. He pondered the quest's ominous nature, particularly its hint that something was about to transform the game into a horror genre at night. With a final wave to the other professors, he began his preparations. 9 hours later, at a bustling cafe near the Magic Tower, Ephorine and her friends were celebrating. Ephorine, beaming, had just received a hefty sum of 100,000 eln, allowing her to treat everyone. Her friends were delighted by the beautiful and delicious desserts she had ordered. They chatted about her plans to establish a club, optimistic about its eventual approval. Ephorine hoped that more people would join their club, even though recruitment had been slow so far. She believed that with time and consistent effort, their club would attract more members. The conversation then drifted to the training session that had taken place earlier that day at the Mountain of Darkness. Her friends mentioned that 50 students had volunteered despite the mountain's reputation for accidents. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the cafe, cutting through their light-hearted conversation. Ephorine and her friends immediately recognized the sound of pure terror. They quickly decided to investigate, running towards the source of the cry. Ephorine, driven by a sense of urgency, sprinted ahead, her friends following closely behind her. But as she ran, the familiar cafe street began to distort. The sounds of her friends faded, and she found herself disoriented, surrounded by an eerie, unsettling darkness. A desperate plea for help reached her ears from somewhere nearby. She realized with a jolt that she was no longer in the cafe, but in a strange, terrifying place, and someone was in grave danger. She rushed towards the sound, calling out to the person in distress. What she found was horrifying. A figure, seemingly a civilian, was being brutally attacked by an unseen force. Before she could process what was happening, Deculein appeared. To her utter shock, he attacked the figure, seemingly joining in the assault on the helpless civilian. Ephorine was aghast, demanding to know why he would attack an innocent person. Deculein, however, remained calm, urging her to look closer, to truly open her eyes. He revealed that the figure was not a person at all, but a demon cloaked in a powerful illusion. Ephorine stared in disbelief as the illusion wavered, revealing the monstrous truth. Deculein, his voice cold and resolute, commanded Ephorine to leave, telling her not to interfere. He explained that the demon was now furious, having lost its prey due to his intervention. He made it clear that it was time to hunt. His lineage, the Deculeins, possessed an exceptional power in subjugating demons, and a deep, ancestral hostility toward them now surged within him. His blood boiled with an endless fury, fueled by the ancient legacy of his family. The renowned Deculeins, known for hunting demons since ancient times, were manifesting the power through Deculein. He would not let the demon survive. His resolve absolute. As he prepared for the final strike, his quest system updated, showing rewards for defeating the demon and unlocking his Deculein attribute. With a powerful surge of energy, he struck the demon down. He looked at the fallen creature, still spilling filth even in its final moments, a testament to its corrupt nature. Deculein gazed at the defeated demon, its grotesque form lying still under the eerie moonlight. Its appearance was not just a random encounter, it was a signal. Ephorine, a young mage who had recently faced a terrifying encounter with a demon, awoke in a clinic, disoriented and confused. Her last memory was being in the foreboding Mountain of Darkness, but a kind nurse explained that she had been bewitched by a demon and passed out. It was Professor Deculein, a figure Ephorine held a strong dislike for, who had rescued her. The thought of him saving her left a bitter taste, making her frustrated that it was him of all people. As Ephorine pieced together the events, she realized she had been unconscious for over a day, missing a crucial class. Panicked, she rushed to the academy, bursting into the lecture hall just in time. Her friend Julia greeted her with concern, but Ephorine brushed it off, claiming the extended rest had left her in peak condition. She looked around, noting the unusual setup. The classroom, however, felt strange. Desks were arranged differently, hinting at a special lesson. The air itself seemed to carry a different weight than usual, a quiet anticipation. The atmosphere shifted when Professor Deculein entered, not alone as usual, but with an unfamiliar young man he introduced as his new teaching assistant, Alan. This surprised everyone. Deculein was known for preferring to teach by himself, never having taken an assistant before. The students exchanged confused glances, wondering about this unprecedented change. Students whispered, speculating about Deculein's sudden change in policy. Becoming a teaching assistant under a renowned professor like him was a significant career boost, a privilege many sought. Ephorine's mind drifted to her own father, a brilliant researcher who had never been given such an opportunity. The memory stirred old resentments, fueling her existing animosity. She wondered about the true nature of Deculein's relationship with her father and why he had always seemed to block her father's path. Deculein announced the day's lecture would be a practical, learning by experience task, giving them 3 hours to solve a specific problem. It was a challenge designed to push their limits. Alan began distributing timers, and Ephraim received hers, glancing at the bracelet on her wrist. Her father's inheritance, now a vessel for her magic. The question echoed in her mind. Why had Deculein never given her father a chance, yet now seemed to offer opportunities to an unknown assistant? She found herself distracted, struggling to focus on the task. Why was Deculein suddenly acting in ways that seemed beneficial to others when he had been so unyielding to her father? Before Ephraim could even begin to formulate a spell, a gasp rippled through the room. Sylvia, a prodigy in their class, had already completed the task in a mere 25 minutes. Deculein, with a curt nod, dismissed Sylvia, leaving Ephraim to grapple with her own mounting frustration. She had to hurry, but her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, unable to settle. One by one, Deculein dismissed the other students as they finished. Julia, Kane, Lehen, Roton, and Iharon all left, their tasks completed. The 3 hours passed in a blur of mounting anxiety. When the time was up, Ephraim was the only one left, her task unfinished. She felt utterly defeated, not just failing to outperform Sylvia, but failing entirely. A crushing wave of self-doubt washed over her. Was she truly so stupid? Could she not even handle such a simple assignment, despite her grand plans of revenge? Just as despair threatened to consume her, a voice cut through the silence. It was Deculein, standing before her, revealing he had waited for 5 hours and 47 minutes. Ephraim was stunned. He was still there, observing her failure. Deculein then delivered a scathing critique, calling her breakdown over an easy task a sign of weakness. He told her that her resentment should fuel her, not paralyze her. He advised her to be cold and logical at all times, asserting that with such a weak mind, she would never reach his level. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Ephraim reeling, his words, "I'm disappointed, Ephraim. I thought you were better than that," echoing in her mind. But amidst the despair, a spark ignited. So what? She thought, as a fierce resolve began to burn within her, her magic flaring, a visible manifestation of her burgeoning determination. This was only the beginning. The real storm hadn't hit yet. Deculein, a calculating professor, spent 6 hours with Ephraim, knowing it was a crucial investment. He understood that her growth was essential for the challenges ahead, especially with the main quest about to begin. The appearance of a demon on the Mountain of Darkness had signaled the imminent start of the main quest. This quest would introduce powerful, good-aligned characters, and among them, Ephraim was destined to become exceptionally strong. Currently, she lacked the mental fortitude and practical sensibilities expected of a mage. However, Deculein knew that once Ephraim overcame these initial weaknesses, she would experience an overwhelming surge in power and skill. He was confident in his own abilities, believing that his unique personality and intellect would always keep him ahead. He was determined not to let Ephraim's future growth ever pose a threat to his carefully laid plans. After her long study session, Ephraim emerged, visibly exhausted but having completed her task. Deculein observed her, noting the sheer effort she poured into her work. The assignment was finished, clocking in at 6 hours and 25 minutes. Deculein reviewed her work, recognizing the inherent flaws that marked her as someone who hadn't graduated from an academy. Despite those imperfections, the quality of Ephraim's results was surprisingly high, easily placing her in contention for the top spot. A system notification confirmed the side quest completion, adding currency to his store. Later, as Deculein prepared to return to his residence, a familiar figure approached him. It was Deculein von Grahan-Yuldeine, the current head of the Grahan family and Julie's older brother. Deculein was a powerful man, a named character renowned for his tremendous combat strength, ranking 3rd overall. He was also the one who had strongly advocated for Deculein and Julie's betrothal. Deculein found himself in a grand hall, contemplating Deculei's unexpected presence. He wondered why such an influential figure would seek him out, especially with the recent issues concerning Julie's Snowflare stone. He worried this encounter could be a death variable, a situation he might not be able to control. Deculein, however, greeted him with a broad smile, expressing concern about the rumored friction between Deculein and Julie. Deculein then proposed arranging a dinner for them later that week, stating he had already planned the menu to Deculein's tastes. He made it clear he would take full responsibility for the event. Deculein quickly departed, leaving Deculein with no opportunity to decline the invitation. He realized Deculein had orchestrated the conversation in a way that made refusal impossible. Deculein knew Deculein held his household and its reputation above all else. Interfering with Deculei's plans, especially regarding family matters, could lead to unpredictable and dangerous consequences. The next day, at the Grahan household, Julie confronted Deculein. adamantly refusing to attend the dinner. She argued that she and Deculein despised each other and she was too busy training her knights. Zeit, however, dismissed her objections, suggesting she was merely sulking over the stolen snowflare stone. Julie vehemently denied this, insisting her reasons ran deeper than a petty grievance. Later, during her training, Julie's subordinate, Veron, spoke ill of Deculein, criticizing the forced betrothal. Julie promptly cut him off, reminding him that a true knight does not gossip or speak ill of others behind their back. She told Veron that she was fine and he shouldn't concern himself with such matters, then turned to leave. Veron watched her go, a new resolve hardening in his eyes. He had found a way to prove his unwavering loyalty. Veron vowed to make Julie happy, believing he alone could achieve this. Meanwhile, Deculein walked away from the Freyden estate, completely unaware of the dangerous promise Veron had just made in his absence. The world was a place of looming threats, where ancient evil stirred once more. Whispers spread across the land, telling of a demon that had appeared at the foreboding mountain of darkness. This was no ordinary threat, and the assembly of elders gathered in solemn council. They remembered the old ways, how magecraft itself was born from mystic arts to crush demonic forces. Now, with demons once again making their presence known, the time for decisive action had arrived. The elders knew they could not sit idly by while such darkness festered. Their resolve hardened. A messenger was dispatched to send a letter, summoning the formidable 12 sorcerers. They were called to answer the urgent summons of Berkt, the weight of the world resting on their shoulders. Meanwhile, in a different corner of the world, Deculein had finally finished organizing the rare items he acquired from a recent auction. It was a meticulous task, ensuring everything was in its proper place. He methodically equipped Rufern's ring for mana recovery and the ancient rune necklace to store additional mana. The rest of his precious acquisitions were carefully stored in a vault, safe from any potential thieves. Yet, despite his careful preparations, one significant problem remained. The most important item he possessed, the magnificent Frostflame Stone, simply would not bend to his will. He tried to manipulate it with telekinesis, but it remained stubbornly inert. Deculein wondered if the stone's inherent mana was actively resisting his magic, creating an impenetrable barrier. In his previous life, this item had been impossibly expensive in the game, so he had only ever admired it from afar. He had no real knowledge of how to properly use its power. Then, a memory surfaced from his recent library visit. He recalled a passage describing how a famed sword must be tamed, a process known as communion. Deculein mused, could this mean he needed to form an understanding, a deep connection, with the item itself? With a new resolve, he began the arduous process of communion with the Frostflame Stone. Mana surged around him as he channeled his power, but the stone barely responded. A system window appeared showing a minuscule 0.1% comprehension, achieved at the staggering cost of 2,000 mana. He grimly calculated that at this rate it would take at least a year to fully comprehend the stone. It was a disheartening realization, making him question if this was truly the best he could manage. Putting the challenging task aside for the moment, Deculein decided it was time to prepare for his evening. He had a dinner arranged by Zite today, followed by an important event in 3 days, the death anniversary. He arrived at the elegant restaurant von Michel, expecting to find Julie already waiting inside, as she had departed earlier. He was struck by her appearance, dressed beautifully instead of her usual armor. He realized how truly stunning she was, understanding why even the original Deculein had been captivated by her. Then another woman spoke, revealing she had simply tagged along to help Julie pick her dress. Deculein immediately recognized Josephine, Julie's sister. He hadn't noticed her at first, so focused was he on Julie. But Josephine was no ordinary sibling. She was a sociopath who would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. She commanded Shadow, a vast intelligence network, and possessed strength comparable to Zite himself. Josephine cherished only Julie, and Deculein felt a chilling wave of murderous intent from her the moment he entered the room. Zite, unaware of the underlying tension, inquired about setting a date for the ceremony, noting their 3-year engagement. Deculein, understanding the danger, declared he would leave the entire relationship in Julie's hands, prepared to dissolve the engagement if she did not believe in it. The family head was dismayed by his casual words, but Josephine, her eyes glowing with a dark resolve, intervened. She asked for a private conversation, and as the others left, she turned to Deculein, demanding to know what he was truly trying to do. Deculein, a powerful but widely disliked individual, sat opposite Julie, the woman he was engaged to. He looked at her intently, breaking the silence to ask her what she truly wanted from him. As he watched her, Deculin's thoughts drifted to an unseen presence. He knew that someone was listening in on their private conversation, hidden just beyond the ornate door. That hidden listener was Josephine, a figure of subtle power who was attentively monitoring every word exchanged between Deculein and Julie. Her presence added a layer of covert tension to the room. Deculein recalled Josephine's earlier departure, a performance of laughter that he now understood was merely a cover. He was certain she had faked leaving to set up her wiretap, never truly intending to go. He realized this hidden surveillance was not just a threat, but also a chance. Deculein knew Josephine was completely unaware that he had already uncovered her secret eavesdropping. In his mind, Deculein formulated a plan. He knew the original Deculein had genuinely loved Julie, and if he could make her believe that deep affection, he might just be able to avoid a looming death variable. This was the core of his struggle, the central conflict that drove him forward. For a man in his position, navigating the treacherous path ahead meant finding a way to survive. With his strategy set, Deculein turned back to Julie, his voice calm yet deliberate. He began to speak her name, preparing to deliver the words he hoped would change their fate. He looked at Julie, his expression earnest, and stated that he had simply spoken his truth to her. He wanted her to believe in the sincerity of his words, despite their troubled past. Julie's eyes narrowed, her voice laced with deep skepticism. She echoed his last word, questioning the very notion of his truth after all the pain he had caused her. Deculein explained that, despite his personal wishes, he couldn't simply dissolve their engagement. He insisted that external forces had progressed too far, making any easy separation impossible. Julie remained unmoved by his explanation, her patience wearing thin. She simply prompted him to continue, demanding to know the real reason behind his sudden change of tone. Her voice hardened as she confronted him, asking what cruel trick he planned to use this time. She fully expected him to reveal yet another manipulative scheme to torment her. Julie then recounted his past actions, reminding him how he had used his influence to force their engagement. She recalled his promise to compensate her family's elders and the specific words he used to persuade her. Deculein simply uttered her name, a quiet interjection to her accusations. He listened as she laid bare the history of his manipulative behavior, letting her anger flow freely. Julie's voice rose in a shout, quoting his infamous words, "Fighting is dangerous." She revealed how those words had been used to control her, striking at the heart of his deceit. She continued, detailing how he had forced her to abandon her dream of joining the Imperial Order. Instead, he brazenly pushed her into the Order of Hadakain, an organization supervised by his own family. Julie didn't stop there. She revealed that when she refused his demands, he had resorted to spreading malicious rumors about her, further isolating and cornering her. Deculein acknowledged the original Deculein's twisted obsession, how he had mistaken control for affection and systematically destroyed Julie's life. He understood her hatred more profoundly than anyone. Looking at Julie, Deculein made a solemn promise he would not repeat those past wrongs. He vowed to change his ways, hoping to undo the damage that had been done. Julie, however, remained resolute. She declared that she wouldn't be fooled again, her deep-seated distrust preventing her from accepting his sudden change of heart. Her voice carried the weight of past betrayals. Deculein persisted, admitting that he knew he had been tying her down all along. He had finally recognized the burden he placed upon her, but the path forward remained unclear, leaving Julie stunned and uncertain. A developer, filled with an enthusiastic spirit, announced a plan to embed a special Easter egg into the game's narrative. She explained that she wanted to introduce a new layer to the background of Deculein, the game's formidable mini-boss. This small addition, she believed, would offer players a deeper understanding of his character. She was thinking about his past, a detail that could truly enrich the world they were building. Another developer, a man named Min-jun, listened with a skeptical expression. He knew that adding anything, no matter how small, would only increase their already heavy workload. He voiced his concerns, stating that such an addition seemed pointless and would only create more work. The team was already pulling all-nighters, and he saw no direct benefit to sales from this. However, the enthusiastic developer, Yu-Ara, insisted. She had even secured permission from the author of the original story. For her, this was about pouring their hearts into the game, making it truly special. Min-jun sighed, acknowledging that she rarely brought things up if she genuinely wanted his opinion. He knew she would do what she wanted regardless, so he simply gave his reluctant assent. He later found himself reflecting on Yu-Ara's approach, remembering how she would always light up when she had a fun idea, excited about the smallest details that could make a difference. He also recalled her simple philosophy, that being considerate to others was the easiest way to care for them. He wondered what kind of joke or Easter egg she might have left behind. Then, the scene shifted. He was no longer Kim Woo-jin, the developer, but Deculein, standing before a tombstone. The name carved into the stone was Yu Ara von Verges-Mahinicht. A wave of confusion washed over him. He wondered why she, Yu Ara, would engrave her own name on this tombstone, and why it bore the words, "Always grateful for you." Deculein, the character modeled after Kim Woo-jin, found himself grappling with this profound mystery. Why would Yu Ara use her own name for his bereaved fiancée within the game? He reached out, his hand gently tracing the letters on the cold stone. The touch sent a shiver through him, stirring a deep well of buried emotions. Suddenly, he felt as if he could hear Yu Ara's voice whispering in the wind, gentle and clear. Memories of their shared past began to surface, flowing endlessly through his mind. He remembered her praising his drawings with a bashful smile, her words always filled with genuine admiration. It was a simple memory, yet it brought a warmth to his chest. He recalled a cold winter night when she had given him her coat, her thoughtful gesture comforting him against the biting chill. He felt the warmth of that moment again. Then, the memory of her holding him close, telling him she loved him, surfaced with vivid clarity. He also remembered how she would lift him up, offering unwavering support whenever he felt tired. 7 years they had spent together, always by his side. These were his memories of her, the real Yu Ara, not just the character in the game. He remained there, kneeling by the grave, lost in the depths of his sorrow. The serene atmosphere of the graveyard surrounded him, a silent witness to his grief. A rustling sound broke the stillness. He lifted his head, sensing a presence nearby. His eyes narrowed, a different kind of tension now filling the air. A figure emerged from the trees, radiating a palpable fury. The man with long white hair glared at him, his voice laced with venom. "I finally found you, you filthy mage." Deculein remained stoic, his gaze unwavering as the man confronted him. The air crackled with hostility, marking the beginning of an inevitable conflict. The man, wizard killer Lockhart, regarded Deculein with disdain. He was a notorious mini-boss villain, exclusively designed to challenge mages within the game. Lockhart lunged, a flurry of swift, powerful attacks. Deculein braced himself, absorbing the blows, his expression unreadable despite the impact. Lockhart continued his assault, his movements rapid and brutal. He was confident, knowing his unique ability rendered any mage utterly powerless against him. He landed another heavy blow, sending Deculein staggering back. Lockhart was certain of his victory, convinced that his power was absolute. Deculein, however, simply stood his ground, declaring that Lockhart's supposed advantage was meaningless to him. A chilling calm settled over his features. He then remembered a recent acquisition, improvements in mana quality, from the game store. He had been practicing with it, discovering its unexpected power. Initially, he had only intended to make a slight adjustment, but the improvement was far more significant than he anticipated. It allowed him to unleash greater force with less mana. He had discovered that this enhancement didn't just affect his mana output, it also dramatically boosted his inherent attributes, making him far stronger than before. Deculein realized that even without this unexpected boost, his Iron Man trait would have been enough to defeat Lockhart. But with his attributes now amplified, the battle had become surprisingly easy. Lockhart lay defeated, writhing on the ground in a fit of uncontrollable rage. He spewed curses at all mages, branding them as apostates and traitors against God. As Lockhart continued his furious tirade, trembling with an intense hatred for mages, Deculein made a shocking observation. He recognized a distinct trait in Lockhart's expression. The Bloodshroud race earned their name because they were born covered in a film of blood red. Their lineage was said to be descended from ancient demons, a fact that cast a long shadow over their existence. They lived throughout the continent, constantly hiding their true identities, forced to remain unseen. They were the polar opposite of the mages, who wielded magic. Magic itself was created specifically to combat demons, establishing a fundamental conflict. The ongoing struggle between mages and the Bloodshroud race formed the very core of this world's history. It was also one of the main plotlines woven into the game's intricate story, shaping the destiny of countless individuals. Because of their ancestry, the Bloodshroud race found their lives constantly in danger. In this world, a cleansing of the Bloodshroud race could be happening anywhere, at any moment. This grim reality hung heavy in the air, a constant threat. Lockhart, one of the Bloodshroud, spoke with Deculein, a mage. Deculein acknowledged Lockhart's suffering, understanding the ages of oppression and repression he had endured. He admitted that Lockhart's experiences were truly a shame, but still, He warned that killing an innocent mage would make Lockhart no better than his oppressors. Lockhart, enraged, snapped back, demanding to know what Deculein could possibly understand. He then defiantly told Deculein to stop his nonsense and simply kill him. To Lockhart's surprise, Deculein revealed that he knew the Bloodshroud race was innocent as well. He introduced himself as Euclid's Deculein, from a noble family that proudly maintained its dignity. Lockhart was utterly bewildered by Deculein's words, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. He couldn't comprehend what a mere mage meant by such a statement. Deculein explained that his family, the Euclides, had hunted demons since ancient times. He described an instinct, a seizing sensation that overcame them when facing demons, an urge that simply could not be overcome. He then calmly asked Lockhart if he had lost his dignity or composure in front of him. He also questioned if he had wavered at Lockhart's provocations. Lockhart could only stare, speechless. Deculein delivered his final unexpected statement to the Bloodshroud man: "You are humans." He declared that his unwavering stance, his ability to treat Lockhart with respect despite their conflict, was the true mark of a noble's dignity. Suddenly, the sounds of approaching guards filled the air. They urged each other to hurry, their footsteps growing louder as they closed in. Deculein, turning to Lockhart, offered an unexpected reassurance he could trust him. He then instructed Lockhart to stay still and allow himself to be arrested. Lockhart was quickly subdued. Inspector Ropa, arriving on the scene, praised Deculein's incredible kick from earlier, calling him Head Professor Deculein. Ropa, still fuming, wondered if he should kick the murderous bastard, Lockhart, some more, but Deculein simply told him to leave the man alone. The inspector expressed his awe at Deculein's magic, marveling at how impressive it was. He had quickly neutralized Lockhart's abilities. Ropa was shocked to learn that Lockhart could neutralize magic. This explained why he was so good at escaping and why their magically engineered radar hadn't worked. He then asked Deculein if he had been patrolling, given his early arrival. Deculein clarified that he had come after receiving a report. He confirmed that he hadn't made the report himself, suggesting someone else must have heard the commotion and alerted the authorities. Deculein then announced his departure, satisfied that the situation had been resolved without bloodshed. He walked away, reflecting on his decision not to harm anyone. He preferred a peaceful resolution, even in such tense circumstances. The next day, a significant event occurred. A meeting was called in Bercht, the first in 15 years. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. At the Euclid estate, a woman arrived in Deculein's training room where he was shirtless. She handed him a parchment, explaining she had to come herself since he didn't care enough. She reminded him that as the residing head, it was his duty to care for their family. She also gently chided him about his lack of clothing. The parchment revealed the reason for the Bercht meeting. A demon had recently appeared at the Mountain of Darkness. As a result, Bercht wanted mages to gather and discuss the threat. Bercht was the name given to the alpine regions in the continent's north, a dwelling for mages known as elders. It was the place where all schools of sorcery across the continent submitted their ideas, and while the magic tower was important, Bercht's decisions were absolute. This sacred place exerted an immense amount of influence, truly the pillar of the entire magic world. Yet, the summoning assembly, an event occurring only once every few decades, carried a chilling alternative name among those who knew its secrets. Attending the Bercht summoning assembly was considered both an honor and a powerful recognition of one's status as a sorcerer of renown. But for many, a summons from Bercht was also known as a mage's grave, hinting at a darker side to this prestigious gathering. Our protagonist, Professor Deculein, found himself at a bustling train station, preparing for this momentous journey. A young woman named Julie, his apprentice, had diligently made all the necessary arrangements, ensuring everything was in order for their departure. Julie approached, a hint of worry in her voice as she noted the heavy snow, even in April. "We really are up north," she murmured to the professor, her gaze sweeping over the wintry landscape, a stark contrast to their usual surroundings. As they prepared to board, a man named Veron introduced himself. He was a captain from the Order of Friheim, tasked with guarding the first half of their journey. He spoke with a quiet confidence, assuring Deculein of their protection. Julie, despite her previous disdain for Deculein, was now doing her utmost to ensure his comfort and safety. She awkwardly tried to smile, a gesture of respect and care that Deculein noticed, recognizing her genuine effort. Deculein, always cautious, subtly used his sharp eyesight to assess Captain Veron. He detected no unusual energy from the man, which made him wonder if he was simply overthinking the situation, or if Veron was genuinely as unassuming as he seemed. Captain Veron confirmed that he would be taking charge of the professor's cabin, a standard arrangement for mages traveling to the assembly. After a final exchange, Deculein, Julie, and his assistant Alan made their way towards the waiting train. As Deculein prepared to board, Julie, overwhelmed by the moment, quietly thanked him for acknowledging her efforts. Her face flushed with emotion, a rare display of vulnerability that surprised even herself. The train began its long journey northward, carrying Deculein and his companions deeper into the wintry landscape. Several hours passed in relative calm, the rhythmic rumble of the train a constant backdrop to their travels. Deculein glanced at Alan, who was now sleeping soundly, a stark contrast to his earlier excitement about the trip. The professor allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection, the peace of the journey, a temporary reprieve from his deeper concerns. It was common knowledge that the Bercht summoning assembly was invariably preceded by the train attack. This unexpected event was the reason a summons to Bercht was also known as a mage's grave, and surviving it was a true game of wits. The original Deculein would have simply bought information about the safest train from dark connections. However, the current Deculein had severed all such ties. Instead, he had made his own thorough preparations, even acquiring advanced martial arts techniques. He had used his Midas Touch ability to greatly enhance the defensive capabilities of gorged suit jacket, pants, and dress shoes, ensuring they offered maximum protection. He had also strengthened numerous wood-steel shurikens and strategically placed them throughout the train. Deculein had even applied his Midas Touch to Alan's protective robes, but all these preparations had left him severely depleted of mana. He hoped his efforts wouldn't be in vain, quietly wishing for the journey to continue peacefully. The quiet hope was shattered in an instant. A sudden, violent explosion ripped through the air, shaking the train to its core. The train attack had begun, and Deculein's carefully laid plans were about to be put to the ultimate test. Deculein, a distinguished professor at the Magic Tower, found himself on a train journey, his gaze fixed intently on a book. His student, Eferin, often marveled at his unwavering dedication, noting how he seemed to work harder than anyone, despite his already prestigious standing in the magical community. Eferin herself was a diligent student, often burdened with numerous assignments and keenly aware of the classes she had missed. She pored over her studies with a fierce determination, aspiring to one day achieve the esteemed title of Archmage, much like her revered professor. She frequently expressed her deep admiration for Deculein, finding his lessons insightful and wishing she could absorb even more of his profound wisdom. Her father, Alan, observed her earnestness with a quiet, knowing smile, understanding her aspirations. Alan, however, carried a deeper, hidden concern that prompted their early departure. He had brought Eferin on this journey to the Bercht summoning assembly ahead of schedule, prompting her to inquire why they couldn't have simply waited a few more days. He then began to unravel the grim truth behind their haste, his voice dropping to a serious tone. He asked Eferin if she had ever heard the chilling, ominous saying that the perilous trip to Bercht was famously known as the Graveyard of Mages. Eferin had always dismissed such talk as nothing more than a fanciful ghost story, a chilling tale designed to scare the faint of heart. Yet, her father's solemn expression and grave demeanor told her unequivocally that there was far more to this legend than she imagined. Alan clarified with a heavy heart that it was no mere tale. He explained that whenever mages were summoned to Bercht, a grim and consistent pattern emerged. A significant number of them always lost their lives. He recounted a particularly devastating incident 15 years prior when 11 mages had tragically perished. The memory was a stark, bloody vision that flashed before his eyes, showing the desperate faces of those who had screamed their last breaths. These were individuals lost to the cruel, calculated machinations of their world, their lives extinguished prematurely. Alan continued, revealing the deeper, more insidious purpose behind these recurring tragedies. He told her that for generations, being chosen and summoned to Bercht was considered the ultimate sign of belonging to a truly ancient and prestigious magical family. However, there was a harsh, unforgiving caveat. If a summoned family failed to attend the assembly for any reason, they were permanently expelled from the prestigious register, their hard-earned status brutally stripped away. Crucially, a new family would then rise to fill that vacant space. He then posed a chilling, rhetorical question to Eferin. What would be the most efficient and easiest way to systematically drag those established, powerful, and prestigious families down from their lofty positions? Eferin, still reeling from the gravity of his words, could only stammer a hesitant, confused response. Alan answered his own unsettling question. He explained that the treacherous trip to Bercht was akin to walking on dangerously thin ice, a perilous journey. It served as a brutal opportunity for ambitious new sorcerers to rise through the ranks by directly targeting the lives of the existing magical elite. Ephorine's eyes widened in dawning horror as the full scope of the elaborate and cruel conspiracy finally became clear to her. This wasn't merely a perilous journey, it was a ruthless battleground, where the weak were mercilessly culled to make way for the ascent of the strong and ambitious. "That's precisely the reason we're rushing," Alan confessed, his voice heavy with the immense weight of his secret knowledge. He had received critical intelligence indicating that a hostile group was planning a major attack on the train scheduled to depart later than theirs. He had deliberately brought Ephorine along with him on this earlier train to ensure her utmost safety, wanting to be as cautious and prepared as humanly possible. He understood the profound dangers lurking in the shadowy corners of the cutthroat magical world. He also found himself contemplating Sylvia, realizing with a heavy heart that he would, one day, need to explain this harsh and unforgiving reality to her. She too would inevitably face the inherent cruelties of this world, and it was his solemn duty to prepare her for it. Alan concluded his somber explanation by stating that, of the 12 traditional families, not a single one had maintained their status without immense struggle and sacrifice. He emphasized that for the sorcerers, deaths occurring on the way to the assembly were simply categorized as magical natural deaths. The world they inhabited was an undeniably harsh place, where the delicate lines between justice and raw ambition blurred almost imperceptibly. Here, survival often demanded a ruthless, villain's resolve, a willingness to make difficult choices for self-preservation. Suddenly, a violent, jarring tremor ripped through the entire train, startling Ephorine profoundly. She cried out in a panicked voice to Deculein, urging him to quickly look outside, her words laced with an undeniable rising fear. The entire train, a massive and intricate structure of polished steel and powerful magic, was now inexplicably suspended in mid-air. This astonishing feat was a stark testament to the immense unseen power wielded by their mysterious attackers. Deculein, surprisingly, remained unnervingly calm. He felt a quiet sense of relief wash over him, noting that his specialized skill, elementary telekinesis, had been fully memorized just at the opportune moment. This crucial ability, combined with his mastery of Estrin's martial arts, had been instrumental in allowing them to survive the initial, devastating impact. Outside, a menacing group of hooded figures, cloaked entirely in dark, ominous robes, stood poised on the train's roof. Their collective presence and their actions left no doubt as to their hostile intentions. They were clearly the orchestrators of this sudden, violent chaos. One of the figures spoke, their voice carrying a promise that if they succeeded in their dangerous mission, they would be lavishly and properly rewarded for their efforts. Deculein observed them with a faint, almost imperceptible sneer on his lips, dismissively labeling them as mere morons. He moved with swift, decisive action, stating unequivocally that he had already anticipated this very attack. With a powerful burst of magic, he engaged the hooded figures, his spells a relentless torrent against their assault. He even took a moment to knock out a subordinate, Alan, instructing him to rest. Deculein then calmly instructed Veron to ensure Alan and any other remaining passengers were safely evacuated to a secure location. He then stepped out onto the heavily damaged train facing the attackers directly and declared that their inevitable deaths would also be conveniently deemed natural. He unleashed a devastating final attack, leaving him visibly exhausted. Veron returned, confirming the successful evacuation of all passengers. Deculein, now visibly drained of mana, explained the immense effort that had led to his exhaustion. As Baron moved closer, he prepared to strike, believing Deculein vulnerable. But he suddenly noticed a chilling, intense change in Deculein's gaze, realizing he had hidden his true power all along. Veron, now fully revealed as a treacherous antagonist, launched his surprise attack. Deculein, maintaining his composure, calmly stated he was relieved. Veron had survived the initial chaos, before declaring with cold resolve that he would personally kill him. What happens next changes everything, and nobody sees it coming. The man known as Deculein found himself in a perilous situation, facing a formidable knight on a damaged train. He had successfully evacuated the other passengers to safety, but now it was his turn to confront the danger head-on, a desperate battle he knew he had to win. As the knight advanced with menacing intent, Deculein, ever the astute strategist, paused to ask a single, crucial question. He wanted to know if this violent confrontation was being orchestrated by someone else, if invisible puppet strings were controlling the knight's actions. The knight, Veron, reacted with fierce indignation, his voice laced with unshakable loyalty. He vehemently denied any external command, proclaiming his devotion to his master, an honorable knight whom he believed incapable of such a treacherous act. Deculein observed Veron's passionate denial, concluding that his master, Julie, was indeed unrelated to this attack. He also recognized the gravity of the situation. Veron was a highly trusted and exceptionally talented knight within their esteemed order. The air in the train carriage grew heavy, thick with the scent of impending conflict and raw power. Both men stood poised, ready to unleash their full might. The very atmosphere around them crackling with suppressed energy and deadly intent, a silent prelude to chaos. The fight erupted with a sudden explosive force that shook the entire carriage. Steel clashed against steel, sparks flying, and the train itself groaned under the relentless impact of their fierce engagement. It was a brutal, desperate dance of survival. Deculein, critically low on mana with only 10 precious points remaining, pondered his slim chances of victory. Could he truly defeat such a skilled and renowned opponent, a talent of the prestigious Frime Order in his current weakened state? He resolved that this was his only option, the singular path forward. His duty as a god had brought him to this point, and he would not falter, no matter the personal cost. With a surge of grim determination, he committed to his next move. A sharp, powerful blow landed, and Deculein grunted, pain lancing through his body. The impact reverberated deep within him, a stark and brutal reminder of the knight's overwhelming power and his own precarious condition in this desperate fight. Despite the pain, he successfully initiated his telekinesis skill, causing significant structural damage to the train. Miraculously, the severely impacted carriage held together, clinging precariously to the tracks, preventing a catastrophic fall into the abyss below. Deculein felt the agonizing sting of several broken bones, a testament to the knight's brutal strength. Yet, he knew his unique trait, Iron Man, would ensure his swift recovery, allowing him to endure and continue the fight. For now. Veron, witnessing Deculein's incredible resilience, expressed his genuine surprise. He couldn't comprehend how the man was still standing, still fighting, after taking such a devastating blow. The knight's persistence was clear, but so was Deculein's. Veron pressed his relentless attack, his movements becoming a blur of focused aggression. He was a force of nature, unwavering in his singular mission, his sword a swift, deadly arc aimed at ending the fight decisively and swiftly. Deculein acknowledged the harsh truth. Veron was far superior to him in his current depleted state. Even if he were at full strength and uninjured, he doubted he could emerge victorious against such a formidable and determined opponent. Just then, a memory surfaced of a profound lecture Deculein himself had once given. It sparked an idea, a different approach to his magic, something he had wanted to attempt for a while now, a desperate gamble. He took out a mana stone, intending to use it as a powerful medium for his spell. He hoped that by channeling his magic through this conduit, he could achieve something entirely new, something potent enough to turn the tide of this impossible battle. The attempt was successful. Sylvia, the girl from the flashback, had managed to create a unique familiar composed of the 3 primary colors of magic. She named it Swift, a testament to its agility and the speed of its creation. Back in the present, Deculein activated a rare and powerful skill, Resolute. This extraordinary ability ensured his mental fortitude remained unyielding and unbreakable in battle, making him almost impervious to mental interference magic. He understood the true Deculein, the character he currently inhabited, would never falter or surrender in such a dire situation. He would stand firm, unbending and unwavering, embodying an unbreakable will, no matter the overwhelming odds. As Veron's sword descended once more, a swift and final strike, Deculein faced the impending blow with a calm resolve. He wondered if this was indeed the final moment of the game, the ultimate end of his journey in this world. A profound and unsettling question hung in the air. If this was truly the end, would he simply wake up in his office as if nothing had ever happened? Or would something far more permanent, something irreversible, await him beyond this final blow? The blade continued its deadly, unstoppable arc, a silent promise of oblivion drawing ever closer. Deculein stood his ground, his gaze unwavering, as the cold steel closed in, leaving the fate of his very existence hanging in a terrifying, uncertain balance. Deculein found himself in a desperate battle, every strike demanding his last reserves of energy. He was a man burdened by a past he didn't truly commit, yet was forced to reckon with its consequences. He knew the fight he was in now was more than just a clash of blades. It was a struggle against a predetermined fate. He pushed through the pain, his body screaming in protest as he unleashed a wave of raw power. The air around him crackled with energy, a testament to the immense force he had just expended. His opponent, Veron, was caught in the blast, flung back with a violent impact. The force was enough to send tremors through the very ground beneath them, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Veron lay there, defeated, his body broken and bleeding. Deculein watched him, his own vision blurring from exhaustion, his mana reserves critically low. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of their ragged breaths. Deculein, barely able to stand, stared at Veron, who was slowly pushing himself up. Veron, despite his grievous injuries, still managed to glare at Deculein, his eyes filled with a chilling resolve. He was down, but clearly not out of the fight entirely. Deculein, weakened, felt the space around them waver as his attack faded. He knew he had to finish this, but his body was at its limit. He looked down at his bloodied hand, clutching his weapon. The cost of this battle was high, and the questions swirling in his mind were even heavier. Veron, still struggling, asked what Deculein had just done. He seemed genuinely confused, as if the immense power unleashed had come from nowhere. Deculein, equally baffled by the sudden surge of power, admitted he didn't know either. The fight had taken an unexpected turn for both of them. More importantly, Veron demanded to know why Deculein was trying to kill him. He claimed to recall no past conflict or reason for such animosity between them. Deculein, however, remembered all too well. He calmly stated that he recalled the evil deeds Veron had committed against his liege. Veron bristled, asking if Deculein truly believed this was for Julie's sake. He questioned whether Julie herself had asked him to do such a thing. Deculein, his expression grim, simply said, Veron would never understand. The weight of his knowledge, of the future he sought to change, was a burden he carried alone. A flashback began, showing a younger Julie, radiant in her knight's armor, being thanked profusely by two children. They expressed immense gratitude for her help. Julie, ever humble, dismissed their praise, stating she had merely done her duty as a knight. Her unwavering sense of justice and duty was evident even then. The scene shifted to a young Veron tied up, being accused by an older woman. Her son, Jason, stood beside her, his face bruised, while Veron protested his innocence. Jason's mother loudly defended her son, claiming he was kind and that Veron must have been the aggressor. She was convinced of Veron's wrongdoing. Veron, despite being bound, snarled back, asking if they wished to die. His untamed spirit, even in a helpless situation, was clear for all to see. The woman, enraged, threatened to hand Veron over to the police, adding charges of assault and trespassing. She believed she had him cornered. Just then, Julie intervened, her presence a calming force amidst the chaos. She listened intently to the woman's accusations and Veron's denials. The woman continued to complain, emphasizing Veron's apparent weakness and how he had scaled their high walls. She painted him as a dangerous intruder. Julie offered to handle the situation herself, suggesting the woman rest while she took the boy to the police. She sought to de-escalate the volatile encounter. Veron, still defiant, insisted he was merely defending himself and had done nothing worthy of police involvement. He refused to accept the blame. Julie acknowledged the Frisia household's reputation for difficult behavior, implying she understood Veron's side, at least partially. Veron, however, vehemently denied that his innocence was only partial. He wanted full vindication. Julie, in her wisdom, still told him he shouldn't hit people. After a moment of silence, Julie made an offer. If Veron followed her, she would teach him how to control himself. It was a chance for a new path. Veron, his eyes wide with a different kind of hunger, simply asked if she would feed him. It was a poignant moment, revealing his basic needs and vulnerability. This was how Veron and his liege, Julie, first met. He recounted how, after that day, he joined the Knight Order, dedicating his life to her. He explained that due to his difficult childhood and personality, he struggled to get along with others. Julie had been the only one who truly cared for him. His liege was always there, always in front of him, a beacon of justice who never compromised with injustice. His love, respect, and admiration for her grew boundlessly. Veron knew his emotions were a burden, getting in her way, yet he believed he had to kill Deculein, convinced that Deculein would someday bring about Julie's destruction. Deculein, looking at his own reflection from another life, promised to change the past, to ensure Julie's future was not one of destruction. He swore he would never harm her, no matter what. Professor Deculein of the Deculein family found himself in a dire situation. His own guard, Veron, had betrayed him, attempting to take his life. But in an act of self-defense, Deculein was forced to kill Veron, who then fell from the cliffside. Far from the scene, Lady Sylvia, who was looking for Deculein, was bound by another and reminded of an urgent assembly they needed to attend. She agreed, but a worry lingered in her mind. Would Deculein make it on time? Meanwhile, at the site of a wrecked train, Security Bureau Vice Chief Lilia Fremian was investigating an explosion and attack. She learned that such incidents were common as the Berkt summoning assembly approached. However, two individuals were currently missing: the guard Veron and Professor Deculein himself. Lilia was directed to a survivor who was still unconscious from the shock of the incident. When the survivor awoke, he recounted a bizarre tale. He claimed the knight had saved him, and more astonishingly, the entire train had been suspended mid-air for a time before it fell. He suspected assassins had attempted a second attack. He even had a photo showing the impossible feat of the train being held aloft by magic. Lilia, examining the photo, mused aloud whether Deculein had raised the entire train with his magic, though the idea seemed absurd to her. But then she received a series of telepathic messages confirming the impossible. Veron was indeed dead. He had tried to kill Deculein, and Deculein had not only survived, but was now approaching the crash site. Lilia watched, stunned, as Professor Deculein, disheveled but very much alive, walked towards them. Deculein, reflecting on the recent chaos, realized how close he had come to death. If it weren't for a strange phenomenon, his own unique magic, he would have been killed by the unnamed knight. He felt a profound sense of powerlessness, acknowledging that he had been saved by an unidentifiable person. Lilia greeted him, expressing her relief and introducing herself as a representative from the Security Bureau, explaining that she had questions about the incident. Deculein, with a sense of urgency, asked for the time. It was 3030. He knew he had only 6 hours left until the assembly. Lilia continued with her formal questions, but her focus kept returning to the knight who had been with him. Before she could press further, Deculein, without a word, vanished. The guards stared in confusion, wondering if he had used acceleration magic to disappear so quickly. Lilia, however, pieced together the incredible sequence of events. Deculein had used telekinesis to prevent the train from derailing, fought off assassins and Veron, and then employed high-level acceleration magic to make his escape. She wondered at the sheer amount of mana such feats would require. Far away, the Grand Burst Assembly was about to begin. It was almost 9053, the designated time for the stars to gather. Lady Sylvia was already there, anxiously scanning the hall, worried that Deculein still hadn't arrived. The assembly commenced, with a formal expression of gratitude to all who had responded to the summons. Sylvia, observing the powerful figures present, felt the incredible mana emanating from Deculein, a candidate for Archmage and a living legend. She understood that she needed to reach such a level of power to even consider challenging for the Archmage title herself. Soon, attendance would be taken and the names of the esteemed families were called. One by one, they confirmed their presence until the name Deculein of the Deculein family was called. A tense silence hung in the air. The speaker announced that if he failed to arrive after 3 calls, he would be eliminated from the 12 sorcerers. Just as the speaker began the third and final call, ready to declare Deculein's elimination, a sudden, brilliant light erupted at the entrance. Through the blinding glow, Deculein emerged, making a statement that none would soon forget. Deculein, a professor of immense power and intellect, carried the weight of a world often swayed by fear and tradition. He found himself amidst a critical meeting where the fate of many hung in the balance. The gathering began in a tense silence, but soon, discussions progressed with surprising speed. The first item on the agenda, concerning a demon spotted in the Black Mountain, was handled with remarkable ease. Efinsel, the residing head and a figure of great divinity, shared his perspective, and the room seemed to fall into agreement. With no dissenting voices among the powerful families, the matter was quickly and efficiently concluded. A brief respite was then called, allowing everyone a moment to gather themselves. Deculein felt a profound exhaustion, having rushed to the meeting with little regard for his own mana or stamina. Yet, despite his internal depletion, his outward appearance remained entirely unmarred, a testament to his unique constitution. He knew it was due to his remarkable traits and attributes, which often felt like an annoying, incredible burden. Just then, Alan arrived, breathless and tearful, having clearly run all the way. The young boy, eyes wide with worry, immediately asked Professor Deculein if he was all right. Deculein calmly reassured Alan that he was fine, but a new, unsettling thought began to stir within him. He realized he could no longer view this child as truly innocent, believing Alan knew he was hiding his identity. The question echoed in his mind. Why was Alan doing this? What was his true purpose? A familiar quote from a world long past came to mind. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Deculein decided it would be far better for him to maintain a vigilant, close watch on the boy. He was determined to uncover Alan's true loyalties and where he would ultimately stand. The meeting resumed, and the next topic was introduced: the enigmatic blood shroud sorcerer. This, Deculein knew, was a far more sensitive and contentious subject, unlikely to conclude as smoothly as the last. Vithan, the fiery head of the Virad family, immediately launched into an angry tirade, denouncing the blood shrouds as insidious creatures. He accused them of secretly breeding within society, silently corrupting the very fabric of their lands. Ethensel, however, calmly challenged Vithan, asking for concrete evidence and pointing out the lack of means to differentiate blood shrouds from other races. Vithan, undeterred, insisted they devise a method and use the Imperial Magic Tower to eradicate them at once. Ethensel's voice sharpened as he warned Vithan to choose his words carefully, especially when speaking of eradication. Deculein observed the clash, knowing from the start that their opinions would diverge so sharply. Vithan pressed on, claiming the blood shrouds were recognizing one another and secretly gathering under a leader, undoubtedly scheming something sinister. Ethensel simply dismissed Vithan's claims as mere speculation, lacking any concrete proof. Vithan grew visibly agitated, disgusted by the indecisiveness, and reminded everyone of the mages lost 60 years ago due to inaction. Then the floor turned to Deculein, who was asked for his thoughts, his family's history as demon exorcists, lending weight to his words. He argued that dwelling on past hatred only led to unnecessary misfortunes, and that suppressing blood shrouds was not the right path. Deculein calmly explained that the blood shrouds were not this world's true common enemy, and their persecution stemmed from a deep misunderstanding. He recounted the Rodren witch incident 237 years ago, where an innocent person was condemned, leading to a great suppression and the killing of many blood shrouds. He then revealed the 60-year-old incident Vithan spoke of was purely political, driven by a mana stone mine on blood shroud lands. Vithan erupted in fury, accusing Deculein of hypocrisy, given his family's historical role in taking that mine and killing so many blood shrouds. Sylvia found herself trapped in a bewildering magical phenomenon. She had read the warning. Once you lie down in bed, refrain from waking until morning or you may find yourself in a different place. Now, she was in a strange, disorienting hallway, realizing with a jolt that she couldn't leave until morning. This eerie situation hadn't happened in her previous room, and she wondered if the denser mana near the Assembly of Elders was the cause. She had been too complacent, she thought, believing it would be fine if she just stayed in her room. But then, a chilling sensation pierced through the silence. Something was there. Panic began to set in as she looked around, unsure where to go in this shifting, illusory space. A rule appeared before her, warning her that the Rosary Hotel was a one-story building and she must not go up or down any stairs that might appear. Just as the warning faded, a staircase materialized before her, confirming the surreal nature of her predicament. Another rule materialized, advising her not to enter or even look inside any open door she might encounter in the hallway. She desperately tried to calm herself, clinging to the thought that there must be a way back, a specific door that could lead her home. The fear became too much, and she cried out for help. Immediately, another rule flashed before her eyes. If someone knocks on your door, do not respond or make any noise. Her heart pounded in her chest, the contradictory instructions only deepening her terror. She just wanted someone, anyone, to come to her aid. Then, a voice cut through the silence, startling her. It was Deculein. He calmly asked if she had lost her way. Overwhelmed with relief, Sylvia asked if she could come in, and he gave his permission, offering a safe haven from the terrifying illusions. Inside, Sylvia quickly apologized, explaining how she had woken up in her bed only to find herself in the strange hallway. Deculein, ever composed, explained that such incredible magic phenomena were common within Burst, often causing spirits to lose consciousness. He added that she should have read the rules more carefully. Sylvia observed him, noting his unchanging appearance and unwavering gaze. She couldn't help but wonder if his unique power was what allowed him to open the door and break through the illusions. Just then, a monstrous, shadowy figure coalesced behind her, letting out a chilling growl. Deculein simply told Sylvia to stay still. With a swift, powerful display of magic, he unleashed an attack that utterly destroyed the roaming ghosts. Sylvia was astonished, asking if he had truly killed them. He explained that it was a specialized magic designed only for killing, but emphasized that it was nothing to be proud of, as magic itself was not created for such a purpose. He then proceeded to demonstrate various forms of magic. He showed her flowing flame, lightning, metallization, and goblin fire, assessing her understanding. He acknowledged her demonstrations, telling her she had done well. Sylvia, however, felt a pang of frustration that he hadn't even truly looked at her work. Deculein then prompted her for her next attempt, continuing to critique her by pointing out a slight instability in the air magic circle she had embedded into her fire. Sylvia, eager for guidance, asked him directly what her weakness was. But Deculein refused to tell her, insisting she discover it for herself. She reminded him that he had told Ephorine her weakness, but he calmly countered that Ephorine had found it out on her own. He advised Sylvia to be patient, assuring her that time was on her side and that her continued dedication would lead to improvement. Deculein's words resonated deeply with Sylvia. He told her she could work towards her goals slowly, one step at a time, and that she possessed a talent shared by only 2 others in the entire world. She had always been praised for her astounding talent, destined to become an archmage, but those compliments had always felt hollow and insincere. Yet Deculein's blunt, honest assessment felt entirely different. His words, though sometimes harsh, carried a weight and sincerity that no one else has ever had. Meanwhile, Deculein was walking through a dark, forested path under the night sky. His wealthy magnate ability suddenly alerted him to something significant, something far beyond his expectations. He mused that this mountain path was usually inaccessible, except during the Burke meeting, which meant he might find something truly rare. As he walked deeper, a massive, shadowy, monstrous figure emerged from the darkness, letting out a terrifying roar. More spectral creatures followed, shrieking and swirling around him, but Deculein, unfazed, continued his calm stroll, ready to claim whatever powerful item lay ahead. Deculein, a man whose every action was scrutinized, found himself at the center of a tense meeting where the very definition of humanity was being debated. His reputation for cold logic often put him at odds with others, but he remained unswayed. The reopened meeting progressed with an air of strange tension as the assembly of sorcerers grappled with the contentious issue of the blood shrouds. Was their demon blood enough to brand them as demons? A heated discussion erupted, one sorcerer arguing fiercely for their demonic nature, but Deculein calmly interjected, likening it to adding salt to water and still calling it water, not salt. Deculein's logical but unexpected stance, seemingly siding with the enemy, left many of the attending sorcerers flustered and murmuring amongst themselves, questioning his true intentions. Young Alan, observing the scene, understood Deculein was merely stating the obvious truth. Yet, he knew that most, like his own father, would suspect Deculein of harboring some ulterior motive. Unable to reach a consensus, the discussion regarding the blood shrouds was postponed until the next meeting. Other agenda items, less controversial, were quickly resolved, and the long meeting finally concluded after several days. Deculein reflected on the outcome, acknowledging that his firm position had likely estranged him from even more people. Still, this was the precise result he had desired for the sake of a crucial main quest in the future. The next day, Deculein found himself in the vibrant Burst shopping district, his mind set on a new task. He needed to create a powerful wand before he could leave the city. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to him. It was Alan, rushing forward excitedly, pointing to someone nearby and declaring them his hero for having brought him safely to Burst. Deculein turned to see Lilia Premian, the vice-chief of the security bureau, standing before him. She too recognized him, her expression a mix of surprise and formality. As a gesture of gratitude for her kindness to Alan, they invited Lilia to share a meal. It was a brief moment of respite, a quiet dinner away from the political machinations. During their meal, Lilia informed Deculein that the investigation into the recent incidents had finally been brought to a close. The news hung in the air, weighted with unspoken implications. Deculein then inquired about Veron, the escort guard. Lilia's face grew somber as she revealed the tragic truth. Veron had died during an ambush, a casualty of the mission. Meanwhile, far from the polite conversation at dinner, another story unfolded. A different kind of justice was being served, and a man named Lockhart faced his reckoning. Under a direct imperial order, Lockhart was sentenced to the infamous Le Cordac, the most notorious prison in the land, as punishment for killing innocent mages. During his interrogation, Lilia, her voice firm, asked Lockhart if he had anything to say for himself. He remained stubbornly silent, offering no defense. Lilia commented on his tight-lipped demeanor, but then Lockhart broke his silence with a single chilling word: power. He activated his latent abilities, purple energy swirling around him. Suddenly, a white-haired woman appeared, reprimanding Lockhart harshly. She accused him of being rash, fearing his actions would negatively expose their kind to the public. She argued that their carefully maintained existence, quietly benefiting from the Empire, would be impossible if their true nature and demonic-like abilities were revealed to all. The woman pressed Lockhart, asking why he had provoked Deculein, revealing that they were already keeping a close watch on the influential Deculein family. Lockhart insisted Deculein was a true noble and should not be killed, even as the woman scoffed, claiming to have a long list of crimes Deculein had committed. Lockhart countered, remembering Deculein's unwavering grace in affirming that blood shrouds were humans, not demons, his eyes filled with a clear, righteous conviction. He pointed out that Deculein hadn't killed him, despite knowing his true nature, a stark contrast to the fact that the Deculeins' ancestors had been the very ones leading the slaughter and oppression of the blood shrouds. This shocking revelation left Lilia stunned, her perception of reality shaken. Just then, Ilham approached Deculein, posing a cryptic question that echoed the uncertainty in the air. What did Deculein truly want to hear? At a rather tense meeting, Deculein found himself confronted by the current head of the Rewind family, who openly questioned his sudden change of allegiance. It was perplexing to everyone present why Deculein, known for his cautious nature towards other magic families, was now siding with the notorious blood shrouds. The Rewind family head did not mince words, reminding Deculein of his past, where he had explicitly called for the annihilation of the very group he now seemed to support. This stark reversal left many in the room reeling with confusion and suspicion. He even brought up Deculein's widely circulated paper, a scathing condemnation of the blood shrouds, still prominently displayed at the university. The accusation hung heavy in the air, challenging Deculein's integrity and motives. The Rewind had then hinted at a more sinister reason, suggesting Deculein might have found a blood shroud slave to exploit for his own private research, a truly scandalous implication that shocked many. Deculein's loyal subordinate, Alan, immediately reacted with anger, demanding that the Rewind family head cease his disrespectful remarks. But Deculein, ever composed, calmly intervened, accepting the insults with a quiet dignity. The Rewind family head, however, was undeterred, continuing his tirade by dismissing Deculein's thought process as akin to rotten cheese. He seemed determined to provoke a reaction from the usually unflappable professor. In response, Deculein simply stated that he could understand the man's perspective, a reply that was both measured and subtly dismissive, leaving his accuser somewhat disarmed but still simmering with resentment. The Rewind head then threw down a challenge, mentioning the upcoming research presentation and daring Deculein to prove his worth. He wanted to see if Deculein's words were mere show or if he truly had substance. Professor Lockhart, witnessing the exchange, struggled immensely to reconcile Deculein's actions with the man she thought she knew. The idea of him aligning with the blood shrouds was simply beyond her comprehension. Despite her deep confusion and evident distress, Deculein offered her a quiet reassurance, telling her not to worry. His calm demeanor, however, did little to soothe her troubled mind or answer her unspoken questions. The scene then transitioned, leaving the tense meeting behind. A bustling, vibrant city came into view, hinting at a new setting and a different chapter unfolding under the bright lights of a place called the Merry Night Pub. This was the world where even villains found a way to endure, a world where their will to survive often shaped the destinies of many. It was a harsh truth, but an undeniable one. The next day dawned, and Deculein prepared to depart from Berkt, leaving behind the political machinations and accusations. He carried with him a sense of quiet accomplishment from a task recently completed. He had commissioned a wand from Rockalock, a craftsman of great renown, a task that, unbeknownst to him, had fulfilled the conditions of a subquest he hadn't even realized he was on. Deculein reflected that perhaps his past visits to Rockalock, seemingly insignificant at the time, had unknowingly contributed to this unexpected success. It was a testament to the subtle impact of his earlier actions. On the train journey back to the Empire, Deculein found himself sharing a carriage with Phaethon. The air between them was thick with unspoken animosity, a silent acknowledgement of their deep-seated rivalry. Despite Phaethon's palpable hostility, the entire ride passed without a single overt conflict. A fragile, tense peace held, ensuring no dramatic confrontations disrupted the journey, much to Deculein's quiet observation. As the long, arduous trip finally neared its end, Alan stretched with a relieved groan, eager to escape the unchanging snowy landscape and return to more familiar, welcoming scenery. It was at the train station, amidst the bustling crowd, that Deculein spotted Julie. Her presence was a welcome sight, a familiar face after the recent tumultuous events and the long journey. Julie approached him, her face etched with clear relief. She expressed her profound gratitude that he had survived the recent ambush, having heard about the dangerous encounter that could have claimed his life. Deculein quietly surmised that she had likely learned the news of the ambush and his survival through Veron, her subordinate, whose involvement in the incident was a complex and painful matter. However, the other survivors from the ambush looked upon Deculein with undisguised resentment, their expressions questioning why he, of all people, was the sole survivor of the harrowing event. Julie, unaware of the full, brutal truth, recounted the news she had received, that Deculein had bravely worked alongside Veron to ensure the safety of the victims during the chaotic ambush. Then, with a hopeful yet hesitant gaze, she turned to Deculein and asked him directly, how was he? The simple question hung in the air, demanding an answer that Deculein found himself entirely unprepared to give. The words caught in Deculein's throat as he wrestled with the painful truth. He had intended to tell her everything about Veron's betrayal and their fierce confrontation, but now, facing her, he hesitated. He knew Julie's conviction was unyielding, yet her heart was not made of iron. The truth, he realized, would be an unbearable burden for her. She would blame herself, tormented by her subordinates' wrongdoing. As the train conductor announced the final call for the Empire-bound express, Deculein offered Julie a vague response, stating that Veron had been emotional. Julie thanked him, her expression still searching for more. Julie then declared her intention to go and see Veron herself, instructing Deculein to rest comfortably after his ordeal. Deculein, though grateful, was left wrestling with the heavy weight of his unspoken truths. Alone once more, Deculein pondered his own complicated feelings, finding it difficult to fully grasp the depths of his emotions regarding Veron. Alan, meanwhile, grumbled about the rude stares from other survivors. Sylvia then appeared, asking what exactly he had held back, and Deculein, with a mysterious air, offered her a gift, stating he didn't even know what it was. Exhausted, he merely wished to return home, concluding another chapter where the villain's will to survive had once again proven stronger than expected. The world had been turned upside down for Deculein, a professor known for his sharp intellect. During the first ambush on a train, he had managed to rescue many survivors, working alongside Sir Veron, but fate had dealt a cruel blow. In the chaos of the second ambush, when the train plunged over a cliff, Sir Veron, his trusted right arm, had fallen. Deculein stood amidst the wreckage, a man of few words, quietly grieving the loss of his loyal companion. He felt a profound sense of emptiness, a reliable presence gone in vain. Back home, another storm was brewing. His sister, Yariel, confronted him, her voice thick with worry and anger over their family's dire financial state. She reminded him of their dwindling funds, accusing him of carelessly writing checks that had pushed their family to the brink of bankruptcy. At this rate, they wouldn't last much longer. Deculein, ever composed, explained that the funds were used to create a powerful wand. Despite the initial cost, he assured Yariel he had a way to secure more money. He then led her to a room filled with various auction items, which Yariel herself had acquired in an attempt to flaunt their family's wealth. She was confused by his intentions. Deculein revealed that he had recently come to understand the true potential of these items. He possessed a unique ability that could unlock their hidden value. With a focused gaze, he activated his Midas Touch, channeling his power into a beautiful vase. The item glowed with a golden light, its inherent magic awakening. The vase, once a simple antique, was now transformed. Its description detailed new magical properties, including flowers that would never wilt and petals that offered fatigue recovery. Its value had skyrocketed, turning a mere decorative piece into something far more significant. Yariel could only stare in stunned silence, her previous anger replaced by shock. Deculein instructed her to call an appraiser immediately and to handle the transformed items with the utmost care. He was already moving on to his next task. Meanwhile, at the university's magic tower, the Magic Exploration Club was bustling with activity. Ephraim, a student, was happily playing cards with her friends, having won several rounds. She grinned, relieved to be exempt from cleaning for a week. For Ephraim, a commoner from a barren family, this club was more than just a place to study magic. She had endured constant hatred and prejudice since entering the tower, never truly fitting in. But here, with her friends, she had finally found a place where she belonged. Her joy was abruptly interrupted by the arrival of two professors, Relin and Beck. They looked upon the club with disdain, their expressions condescending. Professor Relin openly mocked the club, calling it pointless, and its members low-class commoners who were simply taking up space in the magic tower. He questioned who would ever allow such a stupid club to be formed, assuming no respectable professor would endorse such an endeavor. Ephraim, tired of their insults, stood her ground, glaring defiantly at the professors. Her friends around her watched, nervous but also inspired by her courage. Professor Beck joined in, chastising Ephraim for daring to glare at her superiors. He insisted that clubs like theirs had no place in the prestigious magic tower. Professor Relin, convinced he had exposed a flaw, declared that no professor would ever grant permission for such a club. He believed his argument was airtight. but just as he was about to press his point further, a familiar figure stepped into the room. The air grew heavy with anticipation. Deculein, the very professor they were discussing, stood tall. He calmly stated, his voice cutting through the tension, that he was the one who had allowed the club to form. He turned his piercing gaze directly at Professor Relin, asking if he had any complaints. Ephraim, watching her professor defend their club, could only stare in wide-eyed shock.